Oh.
And then you can go to video settings, you have like the blur on.
Yeah, give me a sec. Okay, we are removing blur my background. We are on OWL camera.
Nice, it's looking good.
We're sharing. We're sharing. How's about that, sir?
Looks good, sounds coming through. Should do one more sound test. All right. Okay, no Lisa yet. We'll give her another. Actually, if you want to start introductions.
I want to start introductions. You don't want to start introductions?
I'll start, but are you ready? You need anything else?
Yeah, I'm gonna use the restroom real quick. You do your
Go for it.
2 minutes, I'll be right back.
All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Brian Johnson. I am the past president ×2 of the IES Rocky Mountain section. For those who don't know, the IES is an international organization. It's the Illuminating Engineering Society. There are dozens of sections across the country. The Rocky Mountain section kind of covers mostly Colorado and the Front Range. So we have events every month or so. Chris Wells in the back is actually our current president. He'll be able to speak a little bit more about what's going on currently. After I was president of the IES, I became education chair, which is what I'm doing now. So I help organize things like this for you all. So fundamentals of lighting is something that actually every section is supposed to put on for new people in the industry like yourselves who are looking to get kind of a very broad fundamental overview of the lighting industry. You're all probably pretty familiar with the course outlook right now, but it's a total of 10 modules spread over 18 hours. So that math is kind of confusing. It's a little bit less than 2 hours per module. We're obviously doing a hybrid setup this year. We've done it in the years past. We found it to be pretty effective, especially for people coming up from the Springs. It's nice that you don't have to drive up twice a week. So today's session and then Saturday, what we call the Saturday sprint finish, I think on April 12th, are both going to be in person. April 12th will not be here. It will be at New Light Lighting in Denver. So the link was in that calendar invite, but that's when we'll all see each other back in the same room again. Otherwise, we'll do all virtual sessions this Thursday, and then the following 2 Tuesdays and 1 more Thursday. And then let's see what else. We're taking attendance. I think we got most of you. I might have to ask a couple more for attendance, but it looks like just about everyone we thought was going to be here is here. Today we're covering kind of part of 2 modules. I'll introduce our speaker in just a minute, but module 1 is going to be the introduction to light and lighting. And then we're also going to get a jump start on module 8. So we're not going quite in order, but Lisa Bartlett's going to be our interior lighting and exterior lighting instructor. She's a great lighting designer here in town with AKLD. So she should be arriving any moment. So anyway, I don't know if Carl's coming tonight. Carl is going to be your 3rd instructor. Carl Canfield with TLA, and then Bob Hoskins with TLA is instructor number 4. So 4
Hoskins?
Is that
Bob Hawkins.
Bob Hoskins.
Okay.
Bob Hoskins is an actor.
Hoskins.
Bob, right? That's an actor, right? Bob Hoskins. I think it is. Bob Hawkins. He'll be here, I think, next Tuesday's his first session virtually. Please feel free to get up, use the restroom if you need it, help yourself to more food, drinks, etc. If you need anything else, let me know, or Allie or Chris in the back. Chris, why don't you say a couple words, just if you have anything.
Perfect, yeah. Yeah, thank you all for coming. As Brian mentioned, I'm current president, Allie's our vice president. So we're very thankful to have you all here. Hope you learn a lot. As you mentioned, we've got a bunch of activities. Obviously the FOL is one thing we put on, but we have different social and educational events throughout the year. Upcoming, we've got gonna be doing a dark sky event for Dark Sky Week. So that'll be April 21st. We'll be sending out emails about that shortly. The next day, we're also gonna be doing a scavenger hunt to really highlight, just have some fun, networking. We did this a couple of years ago, and it was a really great event. This year it's gonna be in Golden. So we're gonna go over there and explore some lighting related stuff, some just general stuff. It'll be a great time for emerging professionals.
You go to that place, what's that place, Golden Mill, is that it? It's got like
It's
this.
likely where we will be.
Yes.
It's not confirmed yet. But that, we've got those, we've got light and social justice talk that we'll be doing in May, with Dave Sanders from Clanton and Associates Lighting, which is a really great talk he gave at the IES conference a couple of years ago, with some new research that he's been doing. So we have a lot of the different events. Please, if you're not on our email list, which I think you all will be after all of this, but please join in some of those for new emerging professionals. We have a lot of those available for free to attend. So please join us at those. If you have any questions on what's upcoming, or make sure you're on the list.
They get $1 for every person on the email list.
Yeah. I think it costs us $1.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, with that, I'll pass it off to Brian to introduce the speakers here.
I'll pass it off to Chris.
Okay.
Introduce himself.
My name is also Chris. And it's been a big week. So we're just gonna start it off there. How are you all doing? Good, solid, not bad. It's kind of a younger crowd this year, which is cool. Let's see here, what do I want to ask? Let's see. Who has been in the industry more than a year? 75%? Less than a year? Nice. 5 years? Over 5 years. What do you do?
5 years, electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer,
Electrical designer.
electrical designer,
Drafter, 7 years.
7 years drafting. You are, I bet you're so fast. Yeah, my wife, I'm not allowed to sit next to my wife anymore on the computer because I use a mechanical keyboard. And she's like, why does it sound like thunder in here? So let's see. Okay, so what else do we got? We got like any people like new to the industry? What do you?
Drafting, oh, sorry.
You do drafting, yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any different? Excuse me, interior designers? Anybody new to lighting? What do you do?
Electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer?
I'm on the project order side at NH companies.
Okay, MH companies, yeah. Hi, how you doing?
Good, I'm project manager.
Project manager, cool.
Are you Zoe?
I'm Michelle,
Michelle. Okay.
CT lighting.
Nice.
CT lighting, okay. So we got a couple of, like, MH is rep, right?
Yeah.
We got management side, CT is
Rep.
rep.
Mhm.
I used to work at VI, so we were all frenemies, but I don't work at VI anymore. I'll give you some more context on that. We got a lot of electrical, anything else? We got drafting. You guys work at like MEP firms?
Electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering firms, okay,
Lighting.
on the lighting side. Sweet.
MEP.
MEP design, anything else? Am I missing anybody?
Mechanical engineering.
Mechanical engineering, my wife's a mechanical engineer. I've learned so much from her about pipe and pumps and duct work.
That's what I was just gonna.
Yeah, like as in you're not doing it anymore, or what do you mean?
Yeah, so it's the lighting, so.
You're switching to lighting, okay. No, she enjoys the mechanical engineering stuff, but I'll segue that into my background is in lighting. I've been helping Brian in the IES. I was on the board a long time ago. I've been teaching this in some form or fashion for a couple of years. And I went to CU originally, and then I spent a couple of years in Los Angeles at a company called Lighting Design Alliance that does a lot of like, you know, kind of architectural lighting design. After that, I worked at Acuity for 10 years, built a whole bunch of fixtures. Did a whole bunch of stuff that would just take forever to describe, but and then worked at VI for 5 years, which is a sales rep that sold lights, and I worked on the United Flight Training Center over in Aurora there, and like helped kind of commission all their lighting systems, which was a PoE lighting system. And that was a very interesting experience because like there's a lot of people you have to coordinate there, like getting like IT, and IT was like, well, what do you need now? You know, they order these like giant IT switches that are like $50,000 a piece, like run all these lights, and you know, there's like cable drops everywhere, and you know, they'd be like, well, this light isn't working, it must be your fault. I'm like, well, like I can't see it in software, so I'm guessing there might be a problem. And then we pull the tile ceiling off, and the Cat6 is like literally just chopped in a spool up in the ceiling. I'm like, oh, they didn't plug it in. You know? So that happens. And then about a year ago, I joined a software startup called Parspec, and kind of work on software for procurement for the lighting industry. And they do a bunch of like submittal tools and stuff like that. You guys might have seen it on the kind of the website or something like that, but a couple stuff. Yeah. You ever have a giant problem? Feel free to call me. I put out fires and make stuff work. Let's see, what else? Favorite animal? Koala?
The dog. Turtle.
Turtle. Me too, that's mine. Just gotta put it out there.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't think I have favorite animal, but I've always liked dragons.
Those, my 3D printer at home is literally printing a dragon right now.
Nice.
I got a 7-year-old daughter, so.
Giraffe.
Okay.
Eagles?
Okay.
Elk.
An elephant,
Otter. Deer.
raccoons.
Did we have one repeat? Do you know what the statistical likelihood of that is? Okay. You got any questions?
No, I think just one more thing just about timing. So all of the calendar invites, except for the last Saturday, are scheduled for 2.5 hours. We won't always use that full time. It's just nice to have a little bit of time to flex some modules from, you know, if we don't finish one tonight, we can finish it the next night, so on and so forth. Tonight, though, we are gonna use all 2.5 hours, so we'll do our best to get you out of here at 8 PM. It's gonna be one of the longer sessions. That's all I have. I think if you're ready to.
I'll try to go fast. So we can, there's a lot here. I will try to take my time and not speak too quickly. If anybody has a question, interrupt me. Cool. Raise your hand, say, hey, dude, be like, slow the F down. I'm very casual. I wear t-shirts. So, you know, hopefully I can keep it like somewhat entertaining. I feel like it's a little warm in here. Does anybody else feel like that too?
It does get a little associated.
Okay, if you're gonna pass out, do it against the wall.
Also, there's more drinks there, if you need water or anything, or any more food again. just let
Yeah,
us know.
and feel free to like get water. I mean, if you need to go use the restroom, like I'll try to take like a 5-10 minute break so we can all use the restroom and everybody can like pay attention. But here we go. Everybody ready? Okay. Okay. So this is a registered class, right? You know, you guys have probably all been through this. I have to say this stuff. And you can get credits for this. As Brian said and Chris said that you do need to be here and have attendance count for that to do that. The IES national organization is the one that holds the accreditation for this this class. So they're the one that executes the continuing education credits. So they are the rule makers from the credit aspect, right?
The IES is an international organization now, so we have
Boom.
sections Canada, Mexico, Middle East, Colombia.
There's another big lighting organization called the CIE, which is kind of the the IES is like counterpart in some of Europe too. I can never pronounce what it is because it's French. My boss is French, so I'm learning. Okay, GBCI. Okay, this is the introduction. I don't like to read slides, right? Everybody can read that. A couple of big parts here is history. Actually, that's the next slide, right? History, practice, which all of you guys have probably seen, so we'll cover this quite quickly. I'm gonna move quick through these couple of parts, but again, stop me. I'm gonna spend more time on physics, vision, color, and light and health. I'm classically an engineer, so physics is like my jam, right? And apparently it's also my son's jam, because on Monday he threw a plastic Minecraft pickaxe on accident, and he just turned 4 like this. And, you know, cracked the TV in half. So that sucked. Right, so I mean, if you guys think about, right, the environment we're sitting in here with these really cool like geometric fixtures, like electric lighting is pretty new in the scheme of history, right? We got a lot of this stuff through time, and you know, at first we don't really worry about lighting and how it influences the interior environment, right? Shelter is purely functional. When you look at this picture here, you start to see kind of what happens, as you've all seen, where direct sunlight can cause issues in architecture, right? Glare, you know, basically like unfenestrated windows, stuff like that. And then as time goes on, you get different architectural techniques to deal with direct sunlight, right? You get oculuses, you get clerestory windows, you get windows that are kind of at specific angles such that the light comes in and bounces around the space. And like, these are interesting architectural elements that have held through history. We still do this all the time. A lot of times we use windows now to keep the environment, you know, solid, but, you know, or I should say closed, but that stuff is still there. So fire obviously was the method of light. Now these are really interesting, these oil lamps, right? All these ones that are kind of taken out. So they would have, you know, a wick that you would like put in that was made from either horsehair or something like that would suck up the oil, just like a regular candle. And then, right, that sets the stage for building a candle. Has anybody ever heard of the term candela? Right, it's on all those spec sheets and whatnot. A candela is like a very specific measurement, and it was based off the candle, obviously the candela. And it's like one special candle made of this type of wax with like a wick that's like twisted 13 times, made out of this specific material. And if you can recreate that candle and you light it on fire, you get one candela in all directions. That's where the term comes from. You move over to like burning kerosene, and then kind of like white kerosene, right? It was cleaner burning. But we've all seen like this kind of stuff where you get like the black on the glass, right? That's like the old style kerosene. What's up, Lisa?
Hey.
And then we move on. This was like, I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but the argon lamp was kind of a specific type that made a cleaner burning stuff so that you wouldn't get like the black soot on the exhaust from the flame. And that was like a big invention, right? This was like, oh, it's like the big deal, right? This was for like almost 1,000 years, and then you get this, and then it pretty soon gets replaced by basically feeding gas into your house with a pipe. And right, all these chandeliers, right? We think of these as electric, but back in the day, those were gas fed. So they had, no joke, I saw your eyes there. So they would get up on a ladder and they had a valve, right? So they'd turn the gas on in the house, just like you would for your barbecue or something like that. And then they'd have, you know, like the lighter here on a pole, and then they would light each one of these and they'd burn all night. So, you know, burn stuff in your house, that's the way to do it. Fast forward a little bit, right, on the left there, gas streetlights, still a big deal. And then eventually we start coming towards like the incandescent light. And do you guys know like what the first power plant was supposed to do? Right, this is like Westinghouse versus Tesla. Has anybody been to Durango? Is it Durango? No, it's Telluride. No, nobody in this room has been to Telluride?
First one.
Wow. Okay, well, I highly recommend going. It's beautiful. You can go up this like really sketchy road. You can hike it if you want. It's not very long, but there is a DC power plant at the top from a waterfall, right? It was one of the designs that Tesla did on that power plant. It was like one of the first like power plants in the US. It was pretty cool. But Westinghouse and that whole fight in the electric side in New York, Westinghouse wanted to create a power plant and was making the pitch to create the power plant there to light the street lights. So when they were switching over from gas lanterns to like basically burning stuff that were electrically fed, That's why they wanted to do it there, so it was to power the streetlights, and they were trying to renovate all the streetlights from gas to electric. Can you guys imagine like, somebody basically going to every streetlight every night, lighting that thing on fire? Flipping a switch, so much easier. Now you don't have to flip a switch, you just put a little thingy on top and it does it for you. Okay. Technologies, we'll talk about technologies more in sources. But you can see here, like, there's been a lot of technologies over the day. So incandescent, all the way up through here on the tungsten filament is still basically running an electric current through something to make it super hot. So you're essentially still burning something that you're burning is just metal. But that's how the old MR16s works. You ever remember an MR16? Am I the oldest one here? Am I the oldest one here? I'm almost like freaking out. Not that old, but I'm starting to get some grace from this the software startup. So the tungsten filament is still like a metal wire, right? That's like wound, and then you're throwing an electric current through it. Let me know if you can't see. Remind me your name one more time. Michelle, okay. We get to the like right after the 20s, and you get to like mercury vapor and fluorescence. So these two technologies are like the fluorescent of today, and we've all seen fluorescent lamps in Home Depot, right? They're still there. Right, you basically take a voltage and you step that voltage up really high, and you literally shoot a tiny piece of metal, right, across that fluorescent arc tube. Metal halides work the same way, or mercury vapor, and you shoot it across with such high voltage that it creates an arc. And that's what starts the plasma, and then the plasma is maintained with the ballast. Right? That's kind of how those work fundamentally. But these were electric gas discharge. So there's a gaseous state that you turn into a plasma. So that stuff's like less than 100 years old. Metal halides and high pressure sodium, those are the same thing. But in the 60s, you get electronic dimming. So they didn't have electronic dimming. We only had that for like 70 years. So grand scheme of things, not that long. The T8 fluorescent, ooh, it's like so amazing. And then the curly cues, right? Have you guys ever walked into a hotel with little curly cues in the bathroom? You like turn it on and it's green at the beginning. You're like, what happened to me? So, and then we start to get like the electronic revolution, right? So like the silicon transistor is like somewhere in the 60s at Bell Labs. And then, right, it takes a while for silicon to get really good. And then now the silicon stuff, we can start to make integrated circuits, we can start to do electronic ballast, we can start to have really good control over this stuff. And then now we have NVIDIA and supercomputers, the AI that basically tells them how to do everything. And LEDs, we all use LEDs now. Okay, who has used ChatGPT? Who would have thought that would have been a question 2 years ago? This is a really interesting book. If you're ever, like, it's actually a well-written book. You know, you can make the joke, like, if you're ever bored, go read like the history of lighting, but it's actually a pretty interesting book if you're into this stuff. And the IES has only been around for about 100, right, what is that? Why can't I do math? 19 years, do that right? And like Chris said, the main goals of the IES are kind of like education and standards writing. So back in COVID days when was anybody doing this kind of stuff during COVID, and people were like, can we use like UV everywhere? Did you ever get that question? Right, so the IES like already had like, they did a bunch of research. I mean, they already had a bunch of research on this, like how much UV should you have? How much can you be exposed to? Like how much can you be outside? There's like already a lot of research on that stuff. So they kind of, did like impromptu presentations to try to like, spread scientific data about all that stuff. So that's kind of their main goal, right? And the memberships that like I pay on my IES membership goes to do that stuff. And then I'm also on a committee that works on like economic standards. Like how do you classify like economic return on lighting investment, that kind of thing. That's a little bit about the IES. And then so late 30s, this guy named Richard Kelly is kind of referred to a little bit as like the the starter of the concept of lighting design, right? So like architects have been a long thing. You would have heard of like architects all the way back to like Roman days. But the term lighting design, right, was not this like separated specialty thing. And then Richard Kelly was kind of the first one that got it separated out. And then McCandless actually was a gentleman that started like doing about stage lighting specifically, so he kind of set the standards of like, you know, we're gonna do these productions in the 30s and the 40s. And, you know, obviously the media of transfer of those videos, not very good, so you really have to get the lighting right, because the cameras were so bad. So it was very particular, and this is kind of lighting the stage, and you had all these fixtures that you would utilize, and, you know, the techniques of doing that. And then Flynn is on the psychology side. He was on like the perception of lighting and how does it influence stuff, right? Because the environment that we're in has a pretty big impact on that kind of stuff. We're here, age of the digital LEDs and technologies and the small stuff and the good controllability and the wireless and all that jazz. And I've got 2 kids and I don't really remember anything past like last year, so. Do we have any questions so far? No, all good? Okay. I'm doing all right, I'm somewhat entertaining.
What do you think is next after LEDs?
Oh God, I have no idea. I don't know, I've watched a lot of sci-fi, so I don't know. So what do you think? I don't know.
LEDs are taking a look.
Yeah, I mean, everything is solid state these days, right? Like a lot of the things that we utilize are solid state when they can be. And you know, you like photons, right, are like a subatomic particle that you can, you know, use. And we're gonna go into that in the physics, but we're really based on that. So I think anything that can, you know, emit photons, but a lot of technologies have come and died. It's pretty interesting how many sources there are. Like, what do we make tires out of? Same thing we made tires out of 100 years ago. You know, the rubber's better, right? But you know, the sources have changed so much. I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting if there was like self-illuminated. Like, it'd be interesting if they may have heard of Ghost in the Shell. Okay, there's like a dude in there that has these like, you know, prosthetic eyeballs and can see like all the different spectrums. You know, I don't know if we're gonna get there, but that would be interesting because, you know, if you can just change your mode, you want to see IR and UV, and moths can see UV. They operate in the UV spectrum. So it's kind of weird. I got a funny story about moths later. Okay. Yeah, look ahead. What a great segue. Look at that. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be pretty interesting. I was in Moab a couple of years ago. The war in Ukraine had just started, and we're just hanging out there. We're doing mountain biking kind of with the family and friends, and I see this like line of stuff of dots like shooting through the sky. I mean, all in butt, and I was like, "That's a lot of shooting stars." And the war in Ukraine just started. I was like, I hope this is SpaceX or something, you know. It turned out it was. They were launching a bunch of like little cube satellites. But I think like one issue about this is like, this is like a personal anecdote. Like, you know, looking up the stars is pretty great. I think like being in the mountains when you can go up there and look at the stars is pretty great. You know, as we start to get more dense and populated and have like spill light and stuff, like I think like dark sky association is great. So whatever technology we do use, we have like a responsibility to try to do it well. That way we don't completely ruin the night sky. Be pretty interesting if you don't need any light fixtures anymore. Just everybody's got like their own like little projector and things and like, yeah. Okay. Making great time. Okay. So, I mean, I think everybody here is like involved in this process. I mean, drafters, designers, engineers, right? You guys on the procurement side, like we're all familiar with this stuff. Right? Does anybody have any questions about these stages and the players in kind of the construction procurement? And this is like typical. There's lots of variations of this, right? But this is kind of a typical procurement flow and who plays what role. You guys want like the sarcastic version of this?
Yes.
Right, okay, right. These guys say they want everything, these guys change everything at the last minute. These guys have, you know, like a bent on how pretty it needs to look. These guys don't really care too much. The theater consultants, nobody ever talks to because they ask for things that are impossible and the fixtures cost $50,000 a piece. These guys are awesome. Let's see here. These guys are always pissed off that the system doesn't work. Those guys are, excuse me for guys, I just mean people in general, right? These guys are pretty awesome too. But you know, they never, they always just copy their specs from the last job. Right, these guys are always trying to sub everything that people do. These guys can't keep track of stuff, right? The manufacturer can't ship stuff on time and half the stuff they ship is broken. The general contractor, right, is just squeezing everybody's arm. The electrical contractor can't hit the wires up. The commissioning specialist is just there going, it's not my fault. Right, the end user's like, I want it cheaper. No, wait, no, I don't. I want that thing. Oh, no, make it cheaper. No, to make sure you keep that thing. The facilities maintenance guys are like, can somebody please tell me how this thing works? This one's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, this, I'm not gonna spend too much time here because I think you guys all kind of get this flow, but any questions on this? The physics. Sure, I'm not like. What's going on here? Okay, make sure. My favorite part. Okay. So here's the pop quiz question. What is light? Has anybody thought about that question? One on you.
It's a wave.
It's a wave, okay. Any other? It's a particle. It's a particle. Oh my god, wait, particles are only my favorite. Shot, what do you think?
Absence of dark.
Cool. Inverse negative. Anybody else? Right. So I got into lighting in a very weird way. Like I took a class at CU and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I was at a party and I was like, oh, I should go do my lighting homework. And at that point I was like, maybe I should do this as a career. But right, light is science, right? We've got these aspects of like science and weird chemical reactions and lasers and other stuff, right? Like stuff that burns. There's like a chemistry that's built into lighting. And at the same time, there's like the natural elements, which is the world is so greater when you can see how light interacts with the whole world, right? We take in, if everybody's ever heard this, like about YouTube and the video platforms, like how much more information we can take in from video than audio. Audiobooks are great, right? They let your imagination go, but if you want to just dump a lot of information into your brain until, you know, until we get the thing like hooks right into the back of your head, like all the sci-fi stuff, visual sense has the highest data transfer rate of any of our senses, right? So there's like the natural environment of all that stuff that goes with it. And, you know, I think like lighting also has this emotional state to it, right? I mean, if you guys can imagine some of these aspects of, you know, maybe it's going camping if you like camping and being by a fire, or maybe it's like watching a sunrise or a sunset in colors. You know, maybe it's like an experience with somebody else where you saw somebody and like light came through a window and like highlighted them in a special, in like a certain way, right? It just kind of made that moment special. Like sometimes those memories like stick in your head pretty well. I made all of those up on the fly. None of those are my memories. So, and like I actually saw the Aurora Borealis, Northern Lights, on my honeymoon with my wife in Iceland. That was pretty cool, you know? And it kind of creates like this sense of wonder. On the science side, like we define light as radiant energy, which excites the cells in the retina, right? So now, sometimes people will say things like electric light or natural light, or sometimes, like I've also heard the term like artificial light. What was the other one? I've also heard, if you guys ever heard like a term like scotopic or melanopic lumens. Yeah, don't worry about that, we'll get to it later, that's why we're here. all those things are light. Are there photons, AKA radiant energy, that's coming from something that goes into the back of your eyeball and elicits a visual response? Right, that's how the IES defines light, and it's defined between these nanometers. Does everybody know what a nanometer is? Does everybody know how many nanometers a hair, a follicle of hair is? Take a guess. Pretty close, yeah, somewhere between like 3 and 6. Yeah. I always like to do the pop quiz, but I screwed that one up, okay? So I like to remember the 300,000 kilometers per second. You know, I'm like a kilometers dude, I don't know why, but does anybody remember like why the was it the moon lander or the Mars rover that like it was like $200 million that went like right into the surface? It was Mars, yeah. The reason was that there was Europeans and Americans working on it together on the software code, and they forgot to convert it. That's a real story. So light moves really fast, and we'll talk about relativity maybe later if we get to it. Let's see. Okay, so as you said, light is a wave and a particle. I think that was you, yeah. And we measure it in nanometers of the wavelength, right? So when light is traveling as a wave, the peak to peak is your nanometers, right? It's like one cycle of the wave. And does anybody know, before I get there, what the measurement of the wavelength describes about that light wave? How far it penetrates, like into stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually correct. Did you know that, or you just guess?
I only know that because I have the creepy red light mask for my face.
Is it creepy? Is it actually creepy?
It's really creepy.
Does it make you feel good?
Scaring my kid, yeah, sure.
Do they deserve it?
I mean, he's a 3-year-old.
Okay, I got one.
So yeah, you can decide.
Well, I don't know him. I don't want to judge him or her. Sorry.
Him.
Yeah. Okay, so the wavelength describes the property that we perceive as color. Okay, so have you guys like seen this diagram before? Right. So here's like really long radio waves, and yeah, I like this. This is like my better description here. Okay, so we got long radio waves. By the way, I have put my own flair on this just to keep it interesting, so it's like not super boring and, you know, makes it more fun. We got radio waves all the way to the AM and the FM. These long radio waves are very long. So think about this, like 10 to the 8 meters, right? This is frequency, this is wavelength down below. So 10 to the 8th meters is what? 10 times 10 to the 8th is like 100,000 meters, is that right? 10 million, 100 million meters. So that's like one oscillation cycle of this super long deal. So we're probably only gonna find this in space. That's a really long wave. And then we get to normal radio waves. These are like 10 meters, right? 10 to the 0, 1 meter, I'm sorry, that's 1 meter. 10 to the 0 is 1 meter. Gotta remember all these, you know, powers and crap. Okay, right, here's 10 to the 1, which is 10 meter wavelength. So radio waves, if you think about the radio waves in space, anybody seen the movie Lucy? Where she like has all those drugs leak into her body and she goes and she like can see all the electromagnetic spectrum in the world, right? I love that scene. The movie is super weird, but it's an interesting scene. So that's 10 meters. That means like from here to there, that's one cycle of a wave. And then we get into light over here, right? We go microwaves, the IR, the deer looking out for the lion. And light, right, we said is in the nanometers. So that's 10 to the -9, if I'm not mistaken. No, 6 to 7. So we get big orders of magnitude, right? So now we're talking about that if a wavelength of light has like 600 nanometers, you know, think of that as like, let's see, if I have like 600 nanometers, it's like 100 strands of hair together. So we're getting much, much smaller as far as a full cycle. You've got your UV stuff, everybody parties, X-rays, and turn it into the Hulk. Gamma rays, you got it, nice work. So that's like, that's how we describe the color of light is the wavelength of the specific photon, okay? But also we describe light as a particle, aka photons. And right, the way that this works is when you've got atoms, right, which have a nucleus, and everybody remember like orbitals, right, from chemistry. I have a slide on this, like, but just think about this conceptually, right? When the electron releases energy, right, then you have, that energy has to go somewhere. This is like the conservation of energy concept. So think about this like either you've got your kid or or like a bucket of water, and you're swinging that like close to you, right? It's not super hard. But now think if you put that thing on a 10-foot rope, like how fast and how hard do you have to swing that thing to keep that thing in the air, right? It wants to drop. You have to exert like a lot of speed and a lot of energy to keep that thing in the air, right? If you're just spinning it around, right? Same thing happens. You can spin little stuff like this on your finger, like really fast. But if the hula hoop gets very big, it takes like a lot of energy to do that. So the farther the electrons are from the nucleus, the more energy they will have, right? That's just kind of like the relationship. When they fall back down, they don't need a lot of energy to stay in this area. So they emit energy when they fall back down to the orbitals, and they release that energy in photons and other subatomic particles. Gluons, muons, muons, all that kind of stuff. Anybody know what those are? I don't really either. But they're there. Okay, so that's how I was taught too in chemistry. It was like these orbitals, and they look like circles, and they're like circles, right? This slide is not in there. The only thing that I want to illustrate here, to be like completely honest, is that the electrons actually are in a probability of being in a three-dimensional space. It's not like they're always just going around in a circle. They are constantly moving between these areas, and this is a heat map of the probability of where that electron will be. So it's like way more complicated, and this gets into like the quantum dynamic stuff and starts to go over my head. But this is the reality of it, is these things are probability functions. They're not just little circles where the electrons are. If you never use that again in your life, no big deal, right? Just being honest here. Okay, so how'd these people with way too much hair figure this stuff out? Right. So let me see if I've actually got some notes here. I don't remember all of the specific examples here, but you know, most of these guys were having conversations about, well, is it a wave? There was a conversation about, they thought that like light came from this, like the ether. This is actually like where the term ether came from. There was like this stuff in the air, and you know, the energy was there, and that's like where the light came out of, right? Because it just, you know, they're just kind of like literally making hypotheses up, right? And then Young was the guy who came and, right at the turn of the century, was kind of like, we think that this is really how it works. As far as there is particles that this thing actually is, but it has the behaviors of a wave. And so that's where the double slit experiment comes in. Has anybody ever done this in like real life? You have?
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes some like pretty like fine-tuned stuff to get like that tight to get it to actually elicit. But what ends up happening is, has anybody been on a boat or in one of those like wave pools where there's like a giant ball that's like going in and out? Right? That makes sense, right? Okay, the water deals. Can you guys all imagine that there's these like waves that are going like this, and then when they come together, one of the two things happens: they either cancel each other out and they go flat, or they hit at the same time and it goes super big. If you're in a wakeboard, it's called a double up. It's where they do like the triple backflip, quadruple, whatever. Yeah. I've definitely given myself a concussion from those things, but that might explain a lot today. So what happens here is you have this light source, right? It is emitting photons that are acting like waves. And when they come through this slit, they begin to propagate, and then you get those interference patterns. So the same deal when you have two boats that pass each other like this, and their wakes come like this, the same thing happens with light particles, right? This is like the quantum theory. The last part is in quantum mechanics, when you try to observe something, and this happens with real light, like we're not going to deal with this in our jobs, but I've got a scientist buddy who works at Apple that can't tell me what he does there. And right, like he did his PhD in photonics, right? And it's like some of the stuff that he has to do, he literally has to deal with this issue of interference and like how when they propagate two light waves, you know, how the end result happens. And so when you add this observer into the experiment, it changes the outcome, right? So it's very strange. And to be honest, I don't fully get it. And that's okay. Okay, recap. Right? Light is energy that enables vision, specifically between approximately 380 and 780 nanometers of the wavelength, right? Does anybody remember which color is on the shorter, aka the 380? Or does anybody know intuitively? Go for it.
I was gonna say blue.
Oh, it says it right there. Well, I don't like to read slides, so sorry about that. Yeah. Well, good job for reading. Nice score. Right. And if you know, I'm not trying to like lead the witness here, but if you had like infrared photons, right, would you consider those light? No, why not?
I would say, yeah.
You would? Okay. You kind of shook your head no?
Yeah.
You think yeah? Okay. So does infrared light elicit a visual response to humans? Unless you got this cool goggle on, right? But then what you're doing is you're just transferring it from infrared to visual light to green, right, or red, right? So infrared and UV, right, do not elicit a visual response in our eyeballs. We don't have the photocells to be sensitive to that stuff. So we're very self-centered as humans, and we say that if it doesn't matter to us, then it doesn't matter. So that's how we define light. Okay. This is an important one. Shorter wavelengths have higher frequencies and carry more energy, right? If we go back to that slide where over here was radio waves and over there was gamma waves, right? You can imagine from the Hulk, which one do you think carries more energy? The radio waves? Final answer? Gamma rays? Can I make an inappropriate joke? Is anybody getting offended? Right? Actually, this may happen to females too. Which one, you know, when you go to get x-rays, what do? They put this big lead vest on your private areas, right? Which one do you think carries more energy? X-rays and gamma rays or radio waves? Yeah. Yeah. And literally what happens with x-rays and gamma rays is they have so much energy that they will, like you said, the wavelength depends on the amount of penetration that those photons can go into your body. So what ends up happening is with those really short really short wavelengths of light will actually go in, well, of the electromagnetic spectrum, not light, sorry, I misspoke there, minus 10 points. On the electromagnetic spectrum, when they have that much energy, they will go into your skin and go through your body, and they will hit your DNA and literally break your DNA apart. That's literally what happens, right? You can imagine that that's a bad thing when your cell is like, ah. That's what turns you into the Hulk. Right, so ultraviolet, infrared's not too big of a deal. I'm not in general too concerned about infrared, but ultraviolet, you know, and kind of as we push towards the higher energy stuff has an impact on our health, right? Pop quiz, anybody know what causes skin cancer? What? Bingo, right? Sunscreen says UVA, UVB, right? That's the stuff that causes skin cancer and aging, except for when I'm like this all day going, what's going on? When I get the wrinkles. And we already talked about the particle and stuff like that. Okay. Any questions so far? That's the physics. Any questions? You were all masters now? You sure? Let's see if I can think of like any interesting questions. We're going to vision. Does anybody need a bathroom break? We're moving along quite well. And I'm trying to like take my time, so I'll just sit here for 10 seconds. Delay it, but no, I mean, is everybody doing good? And no questions. We're all solid. Okay. Okay, vision. Okay, so there's 4 components, and this is kind of like classical theory of vision and also like our environment, right? So we have the source, that is what emits the photons, right? These photons can be in different wavelengths, right? And therefore they're in different colors, right? Now here's the pop quiz. If I have all of these colors, what do I see?
White.
Who said what? Who said that?
White.
Did you say white?
Yeah.
Yeah, you are correct, sir. Plus, you can have my 10 points. So the sun, right, emits like wavelengths of all light, and it hits this red apple. We call this the modifier, right? That will be on the quiz. The quiz doesn't count. Don't worry about it. But it's called a modifier, right? And then the modifier, what it's doing, right? The reason that you should ingrain in your mind what the modifier does is it modifies the light source that came from the source. It modifies the light that came from the source. So add all the wavelengths from the sun, it hit the apple. Now when I'm looking at that apple, only the red comes out. Now why does only the red come out of the apple skin?
Yeah, their wavelengths are absorbed.
Bingo! Nice, 15 points. Okay, so now we've got the receiver, which is our eyeball, but it could be a photocell, right? It could be a camera. It could be what else? What are examples of receivers? What is sensitive to light? What captures light? That's about all I can think of off the top of my head. Any others?
Light art.
Light art? Like what do you mean like light art?
It takes in visual lasers and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I do not want lasers in my eyeballs. Another pop quiz, are lasers light? Can you see the laser beam? Then it's light, because we're all humans, that's how it's defined. Or at least I think we're all humans. If there's anybody that's not, let me know. Okay. It made me a little nervous. Then the interpreter, right? So here's a fun fact. Our eyeballs see the world upside down, right? Everybody know that, right? So like, just think about it. Like that stuff comes and it hits my eyeball and it keeps going down. So it's literally on the bottom of my eyeball. The ceiling, when that image comes through, is on the bottom of my eyeball, just like a camera lens, right? If anybody use like DSLRs or anything like that light's coming this way, right? It might change a little bit. Our eyeball might focus that thing into our retina, but it's still coming from the top to the bottom. And then what our brain has to do is flip that thing, right? Because we're pretty sure that the ground is below us, or at least that's how we define it. Now, there was a fun experiment where this one guy, I can't remember his name, but this is a true story, you can look this up. So he wore one of those like periscope things that would invert the light. And he wore these glasses that had like the little mirrored periscope for like 10 days. And at first it made him super sick. He just started throwing up, right? Because like you're walking everywhere and everything is upside down. Eventually, after about like 4 or 5 days, don't quote me on the time frame, but it was like less than 10 days, he completely adapted. He could walk around, he could shake people's hands, no big deal, right? Because the interpreter is literally changing the signal from your eyeball, and it's interpreting and changing and modifying, right? As another example of this is like, you know, if we cover one eyeball, right, we can't tell depth, right? We use both eyeballs to approximate depth. And, you know, I can from here, right, I can tell that you're closer than you guys back there, right? But if I actually need to throw a baseball to you and have you catch something, and I need to have perception of how far away that thing is, I need both eyeballs. So the interpreter is also putting our visual system together and triangulating that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of different parts of the eyeball. The iris is the part of the eyeball that you know is part of the muscle that gets larger and smaller, that usually has the color, right? Whether that's blue or brown or black or green. My wife has 2 different color eyes. That's always kind of fun. My daughter's think, well, but she's 7 and you know everything's a problem. It's a real struggle right now. And then we have the pupil, right? And the pupil is just like we have on a DSLR, right? That's your f-stop. That's how big or small we want that thing to be. It mainly controls the amount of light we want into our eyeball, right? So if we have a bigger pupil, right, you dilate your pupils at the eye doctor, and you know everything's like super bright because there's too much light in there for the environment. And you go outside and your pupils will get really small, right? And you come inside, they will get bigger, right? And if you have your friend and you're walking around in the dark, and then you take your flashlight and like shove it in their eye and turn it on, right? You'll see their pupil go like that, right? Because it's just too much light for them. So that's that reaction. And then, right, the lens sits behind here. A lot of times when people get LASIK, it's this aqueous humor. It's the shape of the outside that they're actually adjusting, and there are surgeries that do the lens as well. There's a fun one called PRK. Has everybody ever heard of that? That's where they shave this down with sandpaper. My buddies in the Air Force had to have that done. Guess where they sent him to have this surgery done? Mexico.
Not here.
Not here. Best doctors in the world. It's for the Air Force, right? Okay, so you get past this stuff, right? So there's these muscles here on the lens, and what that does is, right, it actually stretches the lens to focus. So it either relaxes or stretches, right? Has anybody ever heard, you see about 15 feet away is about neutral for your lens. That means that the muscles don't have to do anything. If you want to focus on something farther away, right, it actually needs to like relax a lot, and so that the shape of it is more spherical, and that way when you have more spherical stuff, it focuses the beam farther away. So that what happens is that you get a farther away focus. And then the other way around is like looking at things that are really close to you, right? Especially like for me, like I've had glasses for about 10 years now. Reading a book, I need my glasses. If I need to focus on something hard, it will strain my eyes, right? So, and also like squinting actually does something very interesting here, because what squinting does is it even removes a lot of the stray light that will hit the outside of your aqueous humor and maybe make it in here. So it literally does like bring your vision down by making it so only a little bit of that light hits your aqueous humor. So squinting is like a real deal. You know, I'm sure I'll be doing that a lot later. So then you have your vitreous humor, which is the fluid that's inside your eyeball that makes it all squishy. Has anybody ever played with like a real eyeball, or just the Halloween ones? Just me?
Science class.
Science class, yeah, like, you know, frogs and all stuff. I remember when I was like really young, my uncle was a commercial fisherman, and we used to go do tuna and stuff like that. And they got pretty good sized eyeballs, and he would just stick his finger and like pull the eyeball out and like, you know, put them on his hand and like make, you know, make little faces. And I was like, God, I'm traumatized. Okay, and then what we have here is the retina, right? So the retina is the part of the eyeball in the back which has all the cells on it, like all the photoreceptive cells. So these are like where vision for gray, which is our rods, and our vision for color, which is our cones. And there's a couple of other ones that live in there that we'll go over in just a minute. But those all kind of live on this red part, which is the retina, and it's all over the back of our eyes. Like it's not just back here, but there's one part right here which is called the fovea, and this is the highest density of our photocells. So this is where we get the best visual acuity, right? Like if I'm looking over here, I can't really read whatever that says, right? Because I don't have the visual acuity in this part of my eyeball. But if I look right at it, excuse me, I can read it just fine, right? So have you ever tried that? You try to like read stuff that's over here just for fun? Probably not, probably just me. And then you got the optic nerve, and the optic nerve actually comes back and right, and actually connects to your to the retina, and there's a part of your retina which has no cells in it. See if I can find. Trying to remember what it is called. Called the blind spot. So basically what it is like right here where the optic nerve, I don't remember what this particular spot is called, but where the optic nerve connects to your eyeball, because all these connector cells come in here and actually are connecting to the retina to transmit the visual signal from your photocells to your brain, the interpreter, there's no photocells here. I don't know if I can do this, but let's see if I can remember what you do there. So I think it's like right here. So you take your thumb and you look straight ahead and you bring this back really slowly. And is it, maybe it's on this side? There's a, oh, that was it. I know this looks like super funny. Right, there is a spot somewhere in here where you can put your visual sensation and that dot will like literally disappear, like you literally can't see it. All right, I should have better prepared for that experiment. There's actually a piece of paper you can bring. I'll see if I can bring it on Thursday. We'll try to do that experiment. Okay, I'll like email everybody a piece of paper print out or something like that. We'll go old school. But anyways, there's a part in your visual system where you literally can't see anything. This has been defended in court where people go, I didn't see the stop sign. Right, and they go back and they go, oh, well, the stop sign was over there and they were looking straight ahead and there's a blind spot in your eyeball. They really didn't see the stop sign. So that stuff actually has happened. Okay, so we've got kind of like an interesting buildup here. In the very back of our eye is our cones, right? That's the very back of the eye. And these cones are represented in these colored things. They're not really colored, right? That's just to give you like, and Michelle, I'm kind of in your way here. Those connect up and the rods are also on this same layer here, right? So the rods and the cones are all kind of in the very back of our eyeball. And then we've got all these cells which connect them together, which are called bipolar cells. And you can see that they connect to multiple cells all at the same time. So it's kind of like a network layer, right? That these, you know, one of these cells connects to 3 of these cells, those cells connect to these 4 cells. It's all like a network, it's all interconnected. You get these amacrine cells, which are kind of like the network connectors, and they bring those up into the ganglion cells. And the amacrine cells are what build this layer to kind of pass all the information in your optic nerve. And then we have the ganglion cells. And the ganglion cells were a pretty recent discovery, probably in the past like 25 years, about what they actually do. Everybody knew they were there, but they didn't know what they did. And it turns out those are a type of cell that are photosensitive. They like are sensitive to light, but they influence our biology. They're not for the visual system. They're for the endocrine system. We'll talk more about that later in life health. So this chart, see, it is 20 degrees. It's 20 degrees off center. So I feel like it's supposed to be like, right? Just spend 15 minutes seeing if I can figure out how to like do this. I don't know, I can't get it. So the density of cones changes. And what this graph means is that if I'm looking straight ahead at that picture of the mountains, right? Think about straight ahead as 0. And I have my cones here in orange. So I can see very good color representation when I'm looking straight at something, right? When I start to look over here in my peripheral, the density of cones, which is what gives me my color perception, drops off a cliff. So I actually don't see color perception very well out here on the fringes of my vision. There's just no cone there to give me any color representation. It's all the rods. So this is a super strange phenomenon because I can see all the colors of all these paintings when I'm looking out the room that way, right? Does anybody have any hypotheses about like why I still know those colors? You remember them, your brain. Yeah, your brain remembers them. It's filling it in for you. Like experiments have been done about this, super crazy, right?
Is that how those like deja vu things happen?
I don't know. Yeah. I've had a lot of deja vus, right? But like, I don't know why they happen that way. And also you have a lot less cones, right? This is relative, right? This is receptors per square millimeter. So like right off, like 20 degrees off straight forward, you've got like 120,000 cones per square millimeter. So it's quite a lot. So what do you think that that means? Right, if I tell you that your cones see color and your rods see basically just like black and white and gray colors, right? What do you think it means that you have like way more rods than cones? We'll see if we get there. We'll hold the witness for now. Don't pay too much attention to the colors of the lines here, but humans have 3 different types of cones. We have what's called an S cone, which is for short wavelengths, and then M cone, which is for medium wavelengths, and L cone, which is for long wavelengths. And as we said, like red is a longer wavelength. It's more this particular cell. Think that this is the sensitivity function of a particular cell in your back of your eyeball. It's also sensitive to greens, right? It's also a little bit sensitive to blues, but it's mostly sensitive to the oranges and the reds, that one cell, right? And then you can kind of extrapolate how that works out with the M and the S cone, right? The S cone is very sensitive to deep blues, right? So if imagine you're in a room that is painted dark blue, the whole thing, right? You will only be using this to see and your rods, because there's almost no sensitivity here relatively, right? A lot more sensitivity in the S cone. And like I said, the rods do not have any color perception. So they just see light or no light. It's like, imagine a grayscale photo. You know, when photographers take like really good grayscale photos, I don't think we have any here. Like you can tell from that grayscale photo what was bright and what was not bright, right? You can still know what that relationship looks like in a grayscale photo, but imagine your rod sees everything in grayscale.
So people who are like colorblind, do their cones just
Great segue.
not?
That's a complicated question. But give me a sec because we got a cool video. Okay, there's 3 types of vision that we commonly talk about. The main one's photopic. That's every day I'm walking around like, you know, this type of room is photopic vision, and it's dominated by your cones. We see mostly in color. You get full color vision. You can see really well. And it's dominated by the cones. So what that means in reality is I have enough light in this room for my cones to be able to give me full visual capabilities. When the light comes down, I start to go into what's called mesopic vision. That's kind of like a Target parking lot at night. No joke, it's about 5-foot candles. And I would have to rely on both of them. There's not enough light for me to rely entirely on my cones, so my rods have to pick up a lot of that weight to give me my just ability to see, literally is the ability to see. You get a little bit of color vision. Anybody in high school ever go like TPing at night? Row back? No? Yes? Yeah. Can anybody remember being out late at night and like the colors don't look quite right? Everything's a bit muted, yeah? Okay. That's why. There's not enough light to see really well. Now this one's really hard to see, but if you've ever like driven up into the mountains and you're kind of walking in the middle of the night, or maybe you've done a 14er and you gotta leave at like 2 in the morning or something like that, or you just, you know, wake up in the middle of the night and you literally have a really nice blackout room in your house, you can see very, very little color, right? You're relying entirely on your rods. You can still see, but you can't see any color. And this is very low light. This is sub 1-foot candle. Because of this transition, there's the concept of like light adaptation. And this is when you go into the bathroom in the hotel and everything's like super dark and you turn on the light, there's no dimmer, and it like blasts you with light, right? You're like, you know. That adaptation from dark to light actually happens pretty quick, right? We're talking somewhere between 30 seconds and 5 minutes to be like fully adapted. And you can adapt to really high light levels. So when we go from this room, which is probably like 20 to 40 foot candles max in here, if we were outside at 5 PM, it would be like somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 foot candles outside, so it's several orders of magnitude higher. You can walk from here and go right outside, it's not that big a deal, right? But we're talking several orders of magnitude. If we go the other direction, and the idea here is if you've ever driven into a dark tunnel, right, and you're like, shit, I can't see, you know, because like there's no lights in this tunnel and it was super bright outside, that adaptation takes a long time to go from light to dark. Has anybody ever gone in a cave and you like sit there for about 10 minutes and then all of a sudden you can see pretty well? Maybe it takes a half hour. It's a lot of nods. You guys have done a lot of cool stuff. I like it. So that's a real thing. That takes much longer to adapt. But if you stay in a super dark cave with basically no light and you just wait, you'll eventually be able to see. Your visual system will adapt over time. So the things that contribute to visibility, got about a half hour, are the task size, the contrast, right? You're on an e-reader, which is that remarkable? Okay, do you like it?
I do.
Yeah, sweet. When they have to focus on that stuff, they have to make sure that the contrast is correct, right? There's a reason that the letters on the book are, you know, black and white, or sometimes white and black, right? Depending on, you know, the system or whatever in night mode. But you have to get contrast right. Otherwise, you literally can't see. We have a couple demos of that coming up. Color is important. Luminance. Now, luminance is the equivalent of brightness. Okay. That all makes sense. Luminance is kind of like the scientific term for brightness. Has a little bit of a meaning in there, but you'll go into that in the metrics. And then the last one is like, how much time do you have to look at a task? Right. So, you know, in the computer experiments, when they like, or the eye doctor, when they, you know, the thing like flashes really quick and you're supposed to like hit a button, you know, like the amount of time that you have to see that task matters. And then as we get older, you know, you get older. As I'm starting to get grays in my beard. Okay, so obviously the stereotypical, like, can you read this line kind of stuff for like your 20/20 vision. And this has some weird stuff. They kind of test like, can you perceive which one is which? And as they get smaller, like, you know, as you get smaller, it gets harder and harder to see the white space in between, right? Because everything starts to kind of blend together. This is a pretty good representation of how contrast affects visibility. No pun. And then how color contrast also matters, right? Super easy, pretty easy, right? Harder. We talked about speed and time. Does that make intuitive sense to everybody? I always drive forklifts with my eyes closed. It's like my favorite thing to do. This graph is really about our age. So you know, these lines on the y-axis over there is how many multipliers worse is your sensitivity to specific phenomenons about vision. So if we take the circular, this one right here, this green diamond here, how well can you discriminate different colors? Like how well can you tell colors apart from each other, right? When you're 90, you have 1/4 of the ability that you did when you were basically 60, like, you know, and at 60, you probably have like 50%. So it gets pretty bad. And, you know, as this stuff gets worse, you just get, everything just gets worse and worse, right? Like, hopefully my eyes last longer than my knees. And here's like the really terrible thing about your visual system and age is that after you hit 30, every 10 years reduces the amount of light that gets to the back of your eyeball by 25% relatively. So it's not, it doesn't go 75, 50, 25, 0, right? It goes 75, right? More like 60, more like 50, 44, 38, right? Every 10 years, that's kind of how it works, right? Which sucks. But I feel it right now because my 7-year-old daughter, like, you know, the funny thing, she's like, why do you need light in here, Dad, to read Harry Potter? I'm like, perspective is so interesting when your parents used to say stuff like that to you.
But also some of that has to do with the color in your eyes.
For sure.
So
Yeah,
like blue eyes, you need to refract a lot more light to be able to see.
and a lot of it gets reflected.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we got the source, which emits the light, the modifier, which changes due to reflections. The modifier could also be clear glass or wavy glass or glass block, or it could be, you know, a film, or it could be a fenestration in a window. Like all those things are modifiers, just anything that is interacting with the light, right? We've got the receiver, which could be a variety of things. Then we got the interpreter, which does a whole bunch of the work of creating our memories around what we see. We've also got visual comfort. So a couple of things that are important for visual comfort are what are called luminance ratios. So can anybody imagine that if I think there's a window behind here, isn't there? Yeah. So you've got a window in your space, but there's no like film or softening stuff, and you have like direct sunlight, and it comes and hits like the middle of the table, and it's super bright in this really defined square. Like that makes it like hard to see, not just for that square, but for the whole room. Because your eyes are trying to adapt to the brightest thing that they can see, right? So because you're going to move your eyes around a lot, so that bright spot on the table is going to move around your eyeball a lot. So it's always adapting to that kind of stuff. So luminance ratios are basically saying like, do I have that really bright spot in the center of my room that's like 10,000 foot candles, and then I've got this spot over here that's like 10 foot candles? It's really hard for me to keep all that stuff in my visual system at the same time because it's trying to find equilibrium. It just puts a lot of cognitive load on your brain and your visual system. Direct glare is super obvious, right? If you're driving down and the sun's like right in your eyes, it's hard to see. That's easy. Veiling reflections, we don't deal with this stuff as much as we used to, but magazines are like the classical example where it's like kind of glossy. It's hard to see. Maybe a glossy photo does the same kind of thing if anybody actually prints anything out anymore. My printer broke because my son he like wants to get a piece of paper to draw on, and he just like takes the tray and just rips it right out of the thing and like knocks the whole printer off and just crash. Cool dude.
Destructive arrows.
Yeah, I'm getting back what I gave my mom, so he doesn't mean to, it's just he can't help it, you know. Okay, and then we got, you know, reflected glare, which is like this is a really good image. I think, you know, I've had this experience a lot on an airplane, you know, where because you're up high above the clouds, like the sun's kind of going down or whatever, and it's coming through the window and whatever you're trying to do, you get a lot of this reflecting glare. It's not direct glare. Flicker is a very interesting concept, which is hard to do in one slide, right? But the gist here is that you can deal with some amount of like flicker, and you know, sometimes if it's hard to do it in here because these are probably like really good LED drivers, but the old LED drivers were not so good because they would drive LEDs in a specific way that you'll talk about in sources. And if you get what's considered like too much flicker, it's just it's a really hard thing for your interpreter and your visual system to adapt to, and it ends up causing like a whole lot of eye strain, can cause headaches. Obviously, people with epilepsy, you know, can be sensitive to certain frequencies of flicker, and they can have epileptic seizures. So it's hard to get there. But if you ever do need to come back to flicker, like there's a whole bunch of stuff out there as far as literature to like review, and IES does have stuff you can access to on that. Okay, brightness perception. What that is. So what things are surrounded by influence your perception of that color. Or in this case, gray, right? Same thing happens with color. You can probably guess what's happening here on the left, but those little gray boxes on the top and the bottom are the same shade of gray, right? But you will see them differently, right? Brain likes to play lots of cool tricks. If anything, does anybody see little, like, look at these inner pairs, they see little circles of black? if you move your eye around, those circles will actually move. Sometimes you might be a little too far away to see it. Yeah, it happens to me like quite easily. Spatial perceptions. This is a trick question. Which red line is longer? This one doesn't influence too many people, right? They're the same length. Okay, I'm gonna stay here and just remind everybody that adaptation is the adjustment of our visual system. And it depends on task size, contrast, color, luminance, the amount of time you have to look at something, and age. And an interesting thing is the more light you apply to something, the less time you need to focus on that. So you can read really fast. You know, the surgeon that's cut me up a bunch of times can do it really fast if he's got a lot of light. Right. Okay. This is the last part, and we're pretty much on schedule. We have about 25 minutes to go. Does anybody want to take a break? Or you just want to keep drilling? Or I'll get my Minecraft pick out and just, you know, keep going. Okay, we're gonna go. Wow, memories apparently.
People died on this, so.
Oh, really? Okay. White, gold. 2. Blue, black. Okay. Does anybody see the white gold on the left, or does everybody see white gold on the left? Is there anybody that does not see white gold on the left? What do you see on the left?
I still see kind of like light.
You see light blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Does anybody not see blue, black on the right? You still see white gold on the right?
Mhm.
Impressive. Pretty interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I don't mean to like let people die on this hill or whatever. I just find it like super fantastic. I mean, the only thing I did to this picture was I literally took it right off the internet. You can see the settings in Photoshop. I just messed with the contrast and the brightness to try to see if you could really kind of strong arm people's visual system to see it in one way, right? It didn't work for her, right? All good. Okay, so here's some interesting differences, right? Just in a Gaussian distribution, which is a bell curve, right? Like in general, when they looked at 2 different people, they had different, and they basically cut their eyeballs open, and while they were dead. And I don't think this slide is in here. Here's you can reference all my stuff here. I put all my, if you want these particular slides, just let me know. But they had different percentages of cones. We talked about medium cones and long cones. Well, think about this. Like if you take different mixtures of paint, right, you mix them together, you'll get different output colors. Same thing, like if I have different concentrations of different cones and the light waves are coming in, and my medium cone says like it's this color, and my long cone says it's this color, and my brain mixes those things together, I will get a color out of it, right? Well, if I have different concentrations of those signals, I will get a different color out of it because my brain is interpreting the literal biological differences of humans into different colors, right? So different people see colors differently, literally, right? And colors are a perception of the wavelength. My analogy here is the fingerprint. We're all different. Okay. There is also some what's called psychoperception in here. So like your memories actually do influence the colors you see, which is really weird. So when we have white light, which I think you said, right? We got white light, all the wavelengths. When all those wavelengths go through something that refracts the light, we get the separation of the colors, because what happens is different wavelengths of photons have more or less energy, and they actually travel slower or faster based on that energy in different mediums. So in air, they're all traveling a little bit different speed, but because they all get to us at about the same time, we got reds and blues and violets and greens and oranges and whatever else there is in the color rainbow. It's all going into our eye, and we see that as white. When we send it through a prism or a water droplet for a rainbow, some of them slow down a little bit and some of them keep going a little bit faster, and that's what causes what's called the index of refraction difference. So this is kind of what that looks like. White light comes in, it splits into different colors, and this really does happen, right? I mean, we've all seen the prism, we all know that this is true. It's really weird. I designed optics at Acuity for like 5 years. You know, and I started to work with some very weird materials that would do some weird things. And you get color striations, you know, on the sides, like the optic would do a thing. And then at the edge, you get little separations of colors. Sometimes like MR16s used to do this, like back in the day, around the beam, the edge of the beam, right? You got this like circular beam that you light your picture with. If you look at the edges, you might see a little not that great color mixing. Boom, 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 little refresher. Okay. So LEDs, like you said, run the world, right? Not really, but they're a lighting source of the time. You can see this is called a spectral power distribution, and it's the relative amount of each of these photons in the different color parts. Does this kind of make sense here? And daylight's like pretty even across, and right, can you remember your name? Tom. Right, Tom said that like when we got all the wavelengths in about the same quantities, give or take, we get white. This modifier right here, any guesses about what this modifier reflects? Everything. And in what proportion?
About equal.
About equal. Nice. Bravo, everybody. So when we use LEDs that look like this, what do you think kind of one of the consequences of that is? Not a lot of photons here, right?
You get weird colors.
Yeah, you can have like color differences, right? Ooh, this is a fun one. If I can get this. Oh, I gotta love the YouTube ads. Okay, so people that are colorblind. So this research company guy that studied visual perception for a long time figured out that the interpreter was actually causing some amount of color blindness, not the eyeball, right? And so what they found was if they eliminated certain parts of the spectrum, in other words, just blocked it out, that it would eliminate that signal that made the interpreter mix up all the colors, right? So this obviously I have no affiliation with this company that makes sunglasses, right? But there's these special sunglasses. Yep. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Almost falls off the step there, right? So before I get any more ads, right? So pretty interesting. So color perception is very weird. Back in the day, we used to have the fluorescents, which were very spiky because they were literally like gases that you would light on. You know, you put this plasma through, and you got these like strong spikes. Now we have a much, this is better. LEDs are better, right? They're smoother, they're more broad, right? In general, that's good. Now, when we talk about a spectral reflectance, as in a red apple, this is literally the reflectance distribution of an apple. So when I take the sun, which is that one over there on the left, and I multiply it, this says plus, but it should be a multiply. That's not bad. right? I get this. I actually did do this in Excel, right? This is real. So this is what you see to the receiver, right? So that's the source, the modifier, and the receiver. Okay, so these are three different reflectances that would come off different objects under sunlight, right? So let's take the big spiky one on the left, the one on the top. What do you guys think? Which object is that?
You mean in terms of waves?
Yeah, so this is the spectral power distribution that would be coming into your eyeball after it reflected off one of those objects.
Top one's those are right.
The azurite, what was the other one?
I said it wrong.
Say it again, I'm sorry, Tom.
The yeah, right.
The azurite, yeah, okay. It is the flower. I have blues and violets and also reds. And they're in higher proportion, right? This is the percentage of reflection over here on the left. And thus I get my brighter looking thing here, right? Now the next one down that only has one spike over here is what? The rock, that's correct. Concentrated reflectance in the blue and then the deep blue, so you get the deep blue. Now, the open ocean is kind of interesting, obviously, process of elimination, but if you've ever been out there on the open ocean, there's nothing out there, it looks kind of gray. Right. So the way I perceive something depends on the light source that I give it. So under white light, all good. Under green light, because red reflects no green, this looks black. Blue reflects no red, so the blue square looks black, right? And similarly here, the blue square looks black, right? And the red, the only thing you can really see here on the red is because the whole background is red, is kind of shadow, right? Just everything looks the same because it only reflects red. So that's the difference in like additive color mixing, right? So additive color mixing is light, not pigment, right? Not printing paper, not you know, not the great slide that I have next, which is about subtractive color that you might resonate with. So when I add more light to stuff, it always gets brighter and it always moves towards white. This is not usually intuitive to us because we're used to playing with colors with like markers and stuff like that. If I add more colors, I move towards white. If I add more pigments, which is subtractive color space, it gets darker, right? I add more colors, you know, kids, it takes them a while, right? They're like, can I get more green? I want to put more blue on this thing. It's like, well, you're just gonna go towards brown and black. So, you know, they don't get it, but they figure it out eventually, right? This diagram is called the CIE 1931 chromaticity diagram. And is everybody familiar with like 2700, 3000, and 5000 K CCT? That's these, you know, these dots that correlate to these lines. So white light that has different color temperatures can have like slightly different hues, right? Do you guys use this much or at all? You do? Yeah.
Tunable light.
With tunable for sure, yeah.
Chris, do you have a time check?
Yep, I got 10 minutes.
Sure. Good. We're
Come on.
gonna do a quick break, passing period, afterwards. Especially for legs.
All right. So this is kind of an interesting slide where you can like take photos and like mess with the saturation in Photoshop, do all the filters, all that jazz, right? And you can really, I don't even know how to apply filters on my phone, but I think it does it automatically. It just doesn't tell me, right? That's why I look so pretty. But you can mess with this stuff a lot, right? And it affects a lot of the visual system. I'm gonna kind of skip this. So the CCT, right, is based off what's called a black body radiator, which just means that it's something that is at energy equilibrium and it's emitting as much energy as it can that's being put into it. A good example of this is an incandescent lamp, right? The old burn lamp, the old halogens, all that kind of stuff. They are very close to black body radiators. They emit almost all of their radiation that is put into them in electrical sense. And, right, you guys are all in this industry, so this probably makes sense to you that the cooler numbers, the more blue numbers, the cooler numbers are higher numbers, right? The CCT of the sky is like somewhere like 8,000 to 10,000, something like that. And we like it, but if you put electric light in, it's like 7,000 K into space. And this is kind of an important thing for the practice, right? Everybody heard of macadam ellipses? No, oh, we're gonna go there. Okay, so on this 4,000 K line here, you can have two different fixtures that are both labeled as 4,000 Kelvin, and they look slightly different. One will be more green, one will be more pink, right? Because by definition, and we made this up, humans made this up, right? Everything on this line is 4,000 K. Okay, so if you order, this is where it usually comes about, is you order 4,000 K from one manufacturer and you put it right next to 4,000 K from another manufacturer. Maybe it's a wall wash and this thing, they might look a little bit different. So what a macadam ellipse is how there's a little circle. It says everything in this circle looks exactly the same. And you end up getting this distribution of circles. I want to see if I have.
It says on chromatic.
Hold on, sorry, I'll answer your question in just a sec. Say again.
What is that chromatic? The phrase you just used.
I'm not sure.
Calvin, if little circles. The ellipses.
Oh, the macadam ellipses, like the chromatic differences? Is that what I said? Okay. Yeah, so the macadam ellipses on this diagram, there are these little circles. And it says everything in this circle here looks the same. Nobody can tell the difference. They all look the same. But if I get two macadam ellipses away, right, like a distance away, then it means I can really tell. And if I have a color temperature that's 4,000 K, and that's on the edge of one of the macadam ellipses, I've got another 4,000 K fixture, I will be able to tell the difference because they're on the opposite side of the ellipse. What's up?
How do you spell that?
MACADAM. Thought there was a thing in here about that, but obviously not. So sometimes you might see on a spec sheet SDCM, and it says like within 3 SDCMs, right? And that means when they give you the CCT, all of the fixtures will be within a 3 macadam ellipse sourcing bin. Because what ends up happening is when they make the LEDs, they're all a little bit different. Right? It's not like a perfect art, so they're all like, they all just do a little bit different white because it's literally a, it's just not perfect. And so what they do is they take those LEDs and they blend them all together and they mix them up, and then you do the law of averages and you get 4,000 K, and it looks pretty good because the thing's got 15 LEDs in it and they're from like a 3, they're all like from this bin. It's called this bin. Usually it's not too big a deal. We mostly got this stuff figured out like 8 years ago or even 6 years ago. This was a much bigger deal. I had to do a whole bunch of crap to like make up a system to like try to mitigate it at Acuity. It was interesting. So color rendition is really important here too. We are almost done. We've all heard the term CRI. Maybe on the drafting side, you guys don't hear it too much, but have you at least heard that around? Okay. CRI stands for color rendering index. And it's basically a 0 out of 100. 100 is like perfect. There's a lot of gripes about CRI because CRI was based off of those colors. That's it, right? So it says, can I render these colors just like an incandescent bulb? And they say the incandescent bulb is the baseline, and it's old, 1965, right? A lot of just think about like how much we've changed in like 10 years. 1965 like an eternity ago as far as tech goes. So they would say how much light reflects off these colors based like in relation to an incandescent. So if you lit this thing up with an incandescent and it let off like 10 photons and you did it with a different source, and it only had 5 photons reflect off of it, that's a CRI of 50. So they wanted to improve it. So what they said is we're not going to take 8 color samples or even 11 or 14. There's a thing called R9, which is usually a big problem for LEDs. They took 99 different color samples. There's a whole bunch of math about how this happens. But I feel like something there. And you get, instead of one number, you get two, because two is better than one, right? You get what's called the fidelity index and the gamut index. And let me see if I have this correct, right? So the fidelity index is like how well does it represent the colors on average? And then the gamut is, does it skew any of the hues, okay? So let me give you an example here. This right here is an example of a gamut problem where it's going to change. So this one right here, this little arrow, it's literally going to make this thing more yellow when it should be green. It's going to make it perceive more yellow. It's going to make this blue perceive more purple, right? Because this goes straight in and out here, that doesn't have a negative impact on the gamut. Now, if you just take the average of these two circles, this is the red is a source and the black is the baseline, that's how you get your fidelity. So if the red circle and the black circle are entirely on top of each other, you get a perfect 100 on your fidelity. But if that circle twists at all, that means you're not at 100, right? TM30 is great, and it sucks that nobody uses it. It's also super hard to understand, so there's that. You know, how many people in that procurement, the whole chain, everybody wants to like have a bunch of conversations about which of your 99 colors does not give you a perfect 100, you know what I mean? What's that? Sorry, say
They don't care.
yeah, they don't care. Yeah, and I'm like nerdy about this stuff, you know, so it kind of sucks. So this is just two examples of two different light sources and what you get out of these things, right? And color rendering is important in some certain circumstances, right? You're doing chemistry tests, it matters. When you need to like remember, when you need to be able to tell organs apart from each other, it matters. You know, it doesn't always matter, but a lot of times it does. Any question on any of that stuff? So we're gonna do light health later. And I'll talk to you guys on Thursday, obviously. I'm gonna stick around for a couple minutes while we take a quick break. And then interior lighting's next. You guys are good to have a bathroom. Any questions? Any fun parts? Any things you're like, oh, that's interesting? Any things you're like, oh, Chris, this is not that cool. All good? All right, take a little break. Thanks for your attention, by the way.
Thank you.
Share. Really.
This is your. Test. Test. You'd like to be able to share your screen when you're good.
Super. About this. I don't get the specialist like science graphics. And
You sure it's so much fun, just
you know, like, I basically just write stuff and.
Yeah, no, you know, there's the extra, I double clicked it and.
I think that's fine, it's showing the screen with the next one, so that's okay.
Trying to get recording this meeting.
Yep.
Like
No.
change the presenter, change the name.
Nope, it's already recorded.
Okay.
It's real.
Okay. Well, right.
All right, everybody, how's that? How are you guys doing? Hanging in here? Yeah, okay, well, it's nice to meet you. I'm Lisa Bartlett. I'm with AKLD Lighting Design. I've been practicing lighting design for a long time. Before that, I practiced architecture and interior design. I'm a registered architect, certified interior designer, but I just love lighting. And so that is what I do. So I read the roster of who's here, but show of hands, who works for a rep agency? Awesome. Who works for an engineering firm? Right? Anybody in the world of lighting design specifically? Yes, sure. And did I miss it? Did I miss anybody? We're just asking people to raise hands of what their involvement are you with PK?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, perfect. We're working with John on a project right now. So we are gonna jump in and talk about interior lighting. I know it's kind of a long first night for you guys, but Chris is super dynamic and hopefully I'll be able to keep you awake as well. We have some presentations, so just at any moment, if you think you're gonna fall asleep, don't worry, we're gonna get up and take a look at some things in real time. See if I can get this. Yes, all right. So here are a few of the things that we're going to be covering. We're not gonna get through everything tonight. I'll see you again next Thursday on Zoom, and we are gonna finish out the interior lighting module. And then we're gonna do the exterior lighting module as well. And in between, you're gonna have all kinds of great content. As we look at lighting design, some of the things that we want to talk about are, we really need to kind of ground us in the basics. You guys had a really good overview from Chris. He's hilarious and a lot of fun. But as we look at what we're doing, we want to make sure that we're covering a number of different ways to think about lighting design. And the first thing I want to point out is that we need to consider lighting quality. So it's not just about what do we have in terms of foot candles or our energy use, what do we have in terms of what people need, what aligns with the architecture. We really want to combine all of those things in what in this Venn diagram here. That's what makes up lighting quality. We're gonna break this down into a few different components tonight to take a look at it. By the way, I welcome questions. We're gonna be moving through at a pretty fast pace, but if anywhere along the way, you're like, time out, rewind, I need to hear more, then just chime on in. It's an informal group. When we consider human needs, and this is an IES class, one of the greatest tools that the IES has given us is the lighting handbook that has illuminance requirements. Did you guys talk with Chris about the difference between luminance and illuminance? Is that, okay, so that'll come in time. When I say illuminance requirements, that's basically if I were to take a foot candle meter, which I happen to have in my handy bag, and I were to measure the light level on incident onto a surface. So when you hear people talking about foot candles, that is illuminance. So this is a foot candle meter. We're getting just shy of 20 foot candles right here. The IES handbook, if we're to look that up, we would probably find that this reads is a little bit low for a task work surface. We'll take a look at some examples of that as we move through the presentation tonight. And if in the meantime, you happen to have resources wherever your firm is, where you could dig in and take a quick peek at some of the examples of those recommended illuminance levels in the handbook, it's a really great grounding. So visibility is what we think about. There's a lot of consideration around task performance. I want to talk for a second about visual comfort. So when I walked in, here's what we had. How's that feel? Maybe a tad bright for right now. Do we feel like this is maybe a bit more comfortable right now? Is that a little bit better? Especially if you're just staring at that. So comfort is that's just think about, I want to encourage you to pay attention to your environment. Take in the lighting and really digest as you're learning the terms that we present. As you're in restaurants, as you're in the grocery store, as you're in your office, start to pay attention to what you're seeing. I'm going to make some more comments about this. Is there somebody from AD design in the room? Don't tell them what I'm gonna say, but we wanna take that into account. There's also a huge health and safety consideration, and I don't mean just like safety, like let's have enough lighting on the stairs to be able to eat this. There are neurological impacts to lighting that change our circadian system. So the biological and neurological impacts of lighting are another layer for us to consider. And last but not least, and I love it that it's last on this slide, this was from the IELD, the International Association of Lighting Designers. The aesthetic component would probably be higher on the list, but no surprise, it's IES. So as far as our considerations for architecture, we obviously want to be thinking about the building into which the lighting we're designing is going to be going, or the lighting that we're looking at pricing, or that we're looking at engineering. And the form and the style of the building, before we even get to performance considerations like, hey, we've got a 50-foot high atrium here, how are we going to get enough delivered light from the space? We want to be thinking about the architecture and the way that the lighting integrates into that. Now, I love what's at the bottom of this slide, daylighting, because daylighting is one of the most important layers of lighting. And when we talk about electric lighting, which this whole series is focused on electric lighting, then daylighting is not really broken down through this particular series, but it is the best way for us to achieve sustainability and energy efficiency, as well as we talk about biophilia and the human connection with the environment. Daylighting is critically important. That said, we want to control it as well. So all of these considerations are some of the things that we want to take into account. We certainly need to be aware of what codes and standards apply in the AHJ, or authority having jurisdiction, where we're designing the building. And there are not only, so there's a difference between codes that are a requirement, for instance, for egress lighting, 1 foot candle average along the path of travel, 0.1 foot candles minimum along that path of egress. Standards, which are a large part of what comprises what the IES publishes. Recommended practices and guidelines are not codes and should not be confused as codes. Sometimes in conversations about design, IES standards will come up and people treat them like a code. They are not. So there's a difference there for us to be aware of. We certainly need to think quite a bit about economics, energy, and the environment. So one of the big things in the world of LED lighting right now, we are starting to see that LEDs have been installed long enough that there are beginning to be more broad failures with lighting that's been installed for, say, 5 years. And this is really becoming a pain point for those of us in this industry, whether you are on the design side or the engineering side or the sales side. It's a pain point for all of us. What I can tell you is that these pieces about maintenance and operation are going to become even more important. I want to encourage you, as you're diving into your world and looking at comparisons between luminaires, get really familiar with the fine print about the luminaire life. So you'll see and there will be other sessions where people are diving into L90 and L70 with you, but does anybody know what those are, just right off the bat? All right, spoiler, you have an idea?
Yeah.
Wait, holler, enlighten us.
Isn't there like a certain time period, like is L7 or whatever, where a fixture is considered past its life? Lifetime?
L70 was the initial standard at which an LED was going to theoretically predicted to emit only 70% of the initial lumens it emitted on day one when it was put into operation. So kind of like your computer monitor, you know, has anybody ever do you ever notice that your computer monitor has gotten more dim over time? If you've had a computer for a long time, LEDs are pretty much the same way. You seldom see an epic failure where your screen just is like gone. I mean, I had one of those recently and that was a lot of fun to get fixed, but generally LEDs simply fade. L70 was the industry accepted standard for the reduced amount of light output that was considered end of life. Now we're seeing much longer duration of LEDs and we're seeing more manufacturers give us L90. So the LEDs were measured at 90% of their initial lumen output. Looking at those years, and if you dig in and you start looking at cut sheets and fine print and warranties, you're going to find that not only are there differences in L70 versus L90, 50,000 hours, 100,000 hours, the predicted amount of failure is different as well. So some manufacturers, like I'll mention Urco, I know some of you are here from CT Lighting, they have not only L90, but their predicted failure rate at L90 at that point is less than 10% of their luminaires. That's pretty much top of industry. So there's a huge variation and we really need to be much more focused on this. Everybody got all riled up about how many lumens per watt we could push out for energy savings, but what does it matter if you're ripping an entire luminaire out of the ceiling and having to chuck it because it doesn't have modular replaceable components? Another heads up, there are several TM standards. TM65 is one of them that addresses circularity in luminaires. So I'm gonna kind of plant a lot of seeds because I have the pleasure of being one of your first instructors. I'm gonna just like drop a lot of breadcrumbs and then I want you to ask your instructors in the next few weeks, hey, we heard about TM65, what is that? Are you gonna teach us about that? So lots of notes. All right. Now that we've talked about a few of the fundamentals, I mean, those are really broad overarching categories, right? Like what's the architecture like? What about energy and environmental concerns? What are the human needs? Now let's dig into something a little more, we're gonna kind of take it from the 50,000 foot view, and we're gonna be about the 10,000 foot view. We're gonna talk about languages of lighting design. Now, Richard Kelly, who is shown here in this picture, you'll hear that name, and you'll hear these terms that he put together that are really still the way that we describe layers of light. So he calls them ambient luminescence, which we would call ambient lighting most of the time, focal glow, which most of the time we call task lighting. However, I would put accent lighting into focal glow, depending on what we're doing with it. And then we have sparkle of brilliance. And for those that can come from something that literally does have sparkle, or perhaps it's just an accent element that has a lot of contrast that really is featured in the space. These three things put together, depending on how you choose to, which terminology you use, these still create the majority of the way that we're thinking about lighting in space. So when we break this down, and by the way, I have a question for you. Does anybody recognize this? It's in Fort Worth, Texas. Does that help anybody? All right, well, next time you find yourself in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you must make time to go there. This is one of my favorite buildings in the entire world. That is Louis Kahn's Kimball Art Museum. And all of this is delivered with daylighting through this incredible center spine that actually has daylighting as well. It is the most beautiful cast in place concrete building with the travertine. And it just, the use of daylight and the combination with electric light is magnificent, and the art collection is extraordinary. Small, very digestible, free, smells awesome, smells like old crap. It is the best. You have to go in and just breathe deeply and take in the air. So, little sidebar there. When we talk about ambient lighting, one of the ways that most engineers approach lighting design first is to consider a kind of general layer of ambient lighting. Where if you almost think of it as like a blanket, like this room actually has a pretty fair amount of ambient lighting. I want to do something, so we're gonna do, or this is just gonna be interesting, we're gonna take a look at uniformity. The illuminance meter here, it will measure when you push the button on the side and it stops measuring when you release it. So I want everybody to take this. I've got about 20-foot candles down here. So I'm holding this, and as I move it around, I'll see the number move. Go ahead and hold it horizontal, make sure it's not in your head shadow. Pass it around. If you get something that is plus or minus 5-foot candles, more or off of 20, so less than 15, more than 25, call it out. If not, pass it on.
29.2.
29.2, okay, we've got more. So,
39.9.
okay, so we've got quite a bit more. We've got a lot of ambient light.
44.5.
Oh, even brighter yet.
47.2.
Okay. Thirty-one more. Okay.
23.4.
There it is, it's falling, it's fell off the edge of the table, and you guys are right under the double layer of overlapping luminaires right here, so no surprise, it's highest where you were. Do you need me to dim those lights for you a little bit more? Okay. Okay,
10.1.
right.
25.
All right, beautiful. So generally, other than a little bit of a pop-up, we do have reasonable uniformity. So if we're thinking about sort of engineering approach to lighting design, most engineers start with the idea of let's do an even blanket of light that addresses what is that IES recommended light level for a conference room application? Well, actually, let's just do this. Since you have the brightest, can you go ahead and measure where you are now over here? Just over kind of between the two of you.
That's not right.
Just press and hold the button
Oh.
again.
83.
83. Okay, we have exceeded IES recommended light levels, and it's a bit uncomfortable. But generally, the approach of designing for ambient lighting, where it's relatively uniform, the goal would be to have visual comfort, which means you don't want it to be too bright, so much so that it's uncomfortable. But that's really helpful for just letting people get around, right? You can see it's kind of just one part of the equation, though. We've missed some of the interest. So the second layer that's described by the IES is really focal glow. And I like to think about this. So this is accent lighting here. This is accent lighting that at its best. There's not really a need. Do you see how dark this part of the floor is? You don't need a light where someone's walking and the light's going to be on top of their head. We want that light on the objects of art. We want that light on the signage. We want that light glowing behind this beautiful wall of booths. By the way, that's Roof on the Wind in Chicago. Pretty interesting in case you want to see it. And then right here, this is another example of focal glow. It's something that's drawing your eye. It also can be very focused. If you need more light, you want more light on the subject like you do on the artwork. The last piece that we have is this idea of the play of brilliance. And so that can certainly come from a luminaire like this that has all kinds of pizzazz in it. These are this beautiful sparkling chandelier. This is a penthouse in Chicago, another fabulous art collection. But it can be beautiful things like lanterns. And that really provides us this sense, I think of it as, just giving us this really human feel in this space. And when you combine all three of those layers, now we have something that's far more complete than if we just we started and ended here, right? So an even blanket of illumination really does not fully explore the opportunities that we have to express lighting design in the space. So far, so good. All right. So John Flynn, another sort of Mac Deppy of the lighting world. His studies took one room, this is right here, and did a series of different combinations. You can see that in some of them, the ceiling is lit. In some of them, the ceiling is dark, but there's just very focused lighting on the table. In some of them, the perimeter walls are lit and the center is a little bit more dark, and in others, there's a combination. Are you able to see right? Okay, great. So these, he was able to categorize by taking feedback from people in the space. What are the perceptions of spaciousness, perceptual clarity, and pleasantness? And again, this is kind of a psychological catalog of reactions in spaces as opposed to the visual responses through Kelly's layers of light. So when we talk about spaciousness, and sometimes we want to design a space that we do want to feel very large and open, the most important way that we can define spaciousness is by making sure that there's intensity, the relative amount of intensity and uniformity of the lighting that the rooms deliver. So we want light on the side walls. So that helps it be a little bit bright, and that helps it feel spacious. So it sort of makes those walls move away from us. If the walls are dark, we have more of a sense of intimacy, right? Like think about sitting around a fire. We'll go to some examples of that. By the way, having a little bit of light on the ceiling also helps that, but it's the light on the walls that is the most important. Intimacy comes when we have very little brightness overhead. So we might have lights overhead that are trained onto a horizontal surface, but generally, if you just think about any bar that you visited or being around a campfire, you've got intimacy, you've nailed it. It's a low light level, the closer to the horizon, the better. The more dim it is, the better, and you kind of want everything around you to vanish. This is one of the reasons you can be in a really crowded bar that is where there are people relatively close, like the next table is pretty close to you, but it still feels like it's intimate because there's almost a veil of darkness between you and the people next to you. So that's how we create intimacy. You want to think about your central candle or your campfire as this gesture for lighting. Clarity is the last of Lynn's. Actually, there's one more. Clarity is one where we're looking at, it's very easy to perceive the entire extent of the environment around you. An airport is a great place where we want to have clarity. You want to be able to see and understand everything about the environment around you. And so that is achieved through high levels of vertical illuminance, but also light on the ceiling, and much more so than our first option of spaciousness. The other piece that's important for clarity is we need vertical illuminance through the space. So if you can imagine that you've got a bright ceiling, you have bright walls, but it's dark in the middle and you can't see people's faces, we do not have clarity. We need good facial illuminance for clarity. This, by the way, if we are in a room that has video conferencing, which this does have that, this clarity is the scheme that we want because we do want that high level of illuminance. All right, last one from Mr. Flynn is pleasantness. So this is kind of like a balance. I think this is a bit of the Goldilocks version. So we are combining modest amounts of vertical illuminance and the lighting on the ceiling, but it's balanced in moderate light levels. So it's just kind of like a really beautiful wrap of light. And we do want some direct lighting from above, and we do want some indirect lighting. So a little bit of everything, and just feels balanced. All right, so again, if we catalog this, we've got our ambient, our task, and our accent. One thing that we didn't talk about specifically is perimeter lighting. And I'm just curious, in a built environment, talk to me. I wanna throw out a couple of examples for me. If we're talking about ambient or task or accent lighting in a typical household, what would you consider like ambient? Lob out an idea. What might be ambient lighting in a typical household? Living room, be more specific.
Like a lamp.
Like a lamp, okay, I'll buy that because it's providing overall lighting, it's not necessarily providing you, if it's a reading lamp though, if it's like a reading lamp with a shade pointed down, would that change your opinion? Okay, I'm agreeing with you. All right, my meter just expired, you guys, so give me like 30 seconds to redo this. Yeah, that's a good example of exactly that.
Cabinet backlights, like the LED strips, are underneath.
And would you call that ambient or would you call that task?
That's it.
Okay, all right, I mean, it does help with ambient lighting. It also, by the way, now you're trickling down because it's also perimeter lighting, right? And if you have a really beautiful backsplash, guess what? Maybe you get some decor, some sparkle impact, okay, so some good ideas. How about lighting at your vanity? How about lighting at the sink? That'd be a task. That's right. Squeezing the eyebrows, shading, you know, all of those things, yeah. So one of the characteristics of ambient lighting is that we do want more widespread illumination, and we do want that to be relatively uniform. So I would give this a relatively uniform kind of ranking. There are IES standards that define uniformity. So when we're looking, for instance, at an office where you want to have pretty similar layers of light across all of the work surfaces, and those work surfaces might move, so you're not necessarily going to train really focused high intensity downlights onto a work surface and then leave the space in between desks to start. In that instance, this is a really great guideline for what we might want to achieve in an office. So that task plane uniformity of less than 2 to 1, that just means that if I had 20-foot candles over here, then the highest amount that we want anywhere on the table is 2x, so 40. So we were close, but a little bit of an outlier over here because of the overlapping light, right? I think weren't you in the first reading, like right around 39, 40? 37. So it's close, so we're kind of in the realm, right? And then the ceiling plane, by the way, is one of the most important areas where we do help with ambient lighting, and we want to see uniformity on the ceiling plane as well. We get a little more forgiveness there because sometimes when you have luminaires close to the ceiling, you do have more hot spot and fall off in between. So that's why we get up to 8 to 1. So we can have a little bit more contrast. All right. Task lighting can happen in a lot of different ways. But it's really important for us to consider this last point here, this source task by geometry. And I believe it's a little bit further into this. It's probably not going to be the part we're covering tonight, but we're going to talk about the directionality of light and some of the pitfalls for the ways that task lighting can be done where it is less comfortable for the eyes. So we're gonna talk about that. I'll just plant that seed tonight. So where this says task lighting spatially or task oriented, you can take the brute force approach and just like whack out a ton of light into space from the ceiling and just be like, great, you've got your plan on the work plan. Or you can do more like here, which obviously that this image, not quite sure exactly how that's working for task lighting, but what we'll point out is that it's localized, right? It's like these guys are localized. This is less about having a whole bunch of bright light in the space, and it's more about providing that task illumination directly on that surface. These are great things to think about. Frankly, having more localized task lighting is an unsung hero in the lighting world. Most of the time, we're busy delivering everything from the ceiling plane or trying to mount some stuff on the walls, and talking about ways we can do that from the work surface and office environments truly is less explored than I think it should be, because it's a way to really bring that light level down and provide individual control, have the source closer to the task area, And actually, there's some interesting introductions into the lighting world right now that are taking a look at lighting for wellness, so circadian lighting, and being able to deliver that much closer to the eye. And that's being done through task lamps. So you really do get more of that incident illumination into the eyes, which has a much better biological effect than trying to deliver all of that from overhead in an indoor environment. All right, so when we talk about accent lighting, contrast is a huge, huge consideration for this. If we think about, I'm just gonna point these out. So right here, if I were to guess, I would say that that's probably about 100-foot candles there. And what's around it on the wall is probably, you know, like 5 to 8. We've got a good 20-to-1 contrast ratio, 100-foot candles to 5-foot candles. That's a good amount. You want to make sure you have at least a 10-to-1 contrast ratio. So let's say you're trying to light a jewelry store case in a jewelry store. You want to have 20x the amount of light inside and on top of that jewelry case than you do on the floor nearby. So you might have 10-foot candles on the floor, you don't really need that much, but then you're gonna have 200-foot candles on that jewelry case, and that's what's gonna make it sparkle. And it's not just the 200-foot candles, it's that you only have 10-foot candles right next to it. So by contrast, it looks really, really bright. So that's what we use when we're doing accent lighting. And by the way, if you ever go into the Clifford Still Museum and you go, has anybody been to Clifford Still? Okay, yeah, beautiful. You guys know where it is, right? It's in the Arts District. It's like 13th and Bannock-ish. Somewhere right around there, 13th and Bannock, I think. Magnificent museum, beautiful work of architecture, amazing day lighting. The coolest story is the mechanical system, and believe me, I am no mechanical engineer, but it is a really fabulous mechanical system. There is a room where there are original sketches that are works on paper, where there's a very, very low threshold for lux in that space. And so it's something like 15-foot candles on those sketches, or 150 lux. But because the walls are so dark and there's almost no light on them, you almost get that 20-to-1. It's not quite, it's a little bit better than 10-to-1, but it's all about the relativity. So that's what this comment is. All right, so when we light 2- and 3-dimensional forms, there are some fun things that we want to do. I'm trying to remember the order of my slides here. We're actually going to do a little mock-up on some accent lighting here in just a moment, but let's talk about perimeter lighting first, because it's time for a mock-up. So when we do perimeter lighting, crucially important, also less perimeter lighting is used, and I think is valuable, because the place our eyes first perceive light is on the vertical plane, right around eye level. Sort of like if you're just looking out at the horizon, that's where your eyes are trained to perceive light. So if we have walls that are dark, it doesn't matter how much light we put here, it still feels dark to our brains. When we put light here, even if it's kind of dark here, our eyes perceive it as bright. And that doesn't mean uncomfortably bright, but this perceived space is well lit. So lighting walls is really an amazing way to create a sense of spaciousness. If we go back to Mr. Flynn, pleasantness, also Mr. Flynn, we can provide ambient luminescence by having some perimeter illumination. We can provide visual clarity. So we can do all of those things. I want to demonstrate 2 different techniques to light the wall. And let's see, we'll start with, we're going to start with a little bit more of a general approach. And do you mind just hitting the down arrow on that little white pedestal dimmer over there for me? Could just take it down to the really light level. That's great. Thank you. All right, so, and sorry for those of you who are having to turn around, feel free to stand up if you would prefer. And sorry about that lighting, guys, just to make sure you're awake. So when we look at, this is called wall washing. So we have a wide beam. If you look at this, you can see we have a pretty wide flare of that beam, right? This is a great way to showcase a beam spread on the light and understand what you have, which is put it short end of the wall. And when we do this, we end up getting just a nice splash of light on the wall. I mean, this is 1 foot of light, you guys, this is not a lot. But look at the brick, I want you to really pay attention to the brick, like we can see it, we can see the color of it, it looks nice. But pay special attention to the texture, because we are going to now take a look at grazing. Grazing uses a much more narrow beam of light. And we rake much more closely to the texture using that narrow beam. Now, we're not gonna be lighting up the artwork like this. If we washed this wall like this, we get the added benefit of lighting the artwork. Grazing doesn't do that, but if you have a beautiful textured tile or stone, now we really get to show it off. Do you see how much of a difference we have in texture? And now the wall material itself becomes our art. And when we look at this narrow rake of light that we have here. So both instances of perimeter lighting, extremely different outcomes, would you say? Yeah. So, all right, while I unplug these, who likes the wall wash broader distribution better? Raise your hand. Okay, and then by corollary, who liked the grays better? Okay, yeah, it's really interesting. Different spaces really merit different things. And as a lighting designer, you know, talking with the design team about where there are materials to light is really, really hugely important. So you can see some examples. This was a project, this was a pretty funky piece of artwork. And we weren't sure exactly how that was going to look when it was installed. So you can use track lighting grays. Now we had some scalloping at the top, but the effect, look at those long shadows from those pegs. You can do it in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to just be with a linear. And same with wall wash. You can wall wash with point source fixtures. It doesn't have to be with the linear. But we ended up with this beautiful perimeter lighting. Actually, we had more perimeter lighting on this wall by the time the project was finished, and we did more indirect on the other side of that wood. But there was a lot more. I need to change out that photo for a finished photo. A lot more wash on that wall, and it makes the space feel really bright, like really interesting. So the decorative lighting piece of things, you know, this can't be underestimated, even though it's not going to be in the layers of light where you're like, oh, you know, I already got my base layers of light. I've already done some accent, but the sparkle really can enhance mood and create something that feels very somewhat celebratory, especially in hospitality spaces. We want to consider that, and any more healthcare spaces, offices, so many spaces have this element of hospitality in them that this becomes really, really important. And it can be done by introducing color. So don't be shy. All right. So I want to do a little bit of a play with, I've made this flower arrangement this week and my hellebores are looking a little bit sad. But we're going to do a little bit of play with this and just play around with a few of the lighting effects that we can achieve when we use accent lighting. We're going to play with a couple of different beam angles and a few different color temperatures. Right. All the stuff that I brought in and then rearranged it, so. We're just having lots of fun. All right. How you guys doing? You hanging in there? You're troopers. You're doing great. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. These are some really fun snap lenses, so. I'm going to. Good ones for us. The idea here is to take a look at the varying effects we can achieve when we do play with different beam spreads. And if I'm lucky, I will be able to find a color temperature shifter. I have another pack of these that seems to, I'm not sure what's, oh, thank you. I was like, I pulled them out. I don't know where they are. There we go. All right. So accent lighting. Remember the comment about intensity and focus. We want a good 20 to 1 focus. So let's just take a little peek using our light meter. Perfect, thank you. You can send that back down here. All right. All right, I'll ask you to be our measure extraordinaire. So I'm gonna shine the light here. I want you to just put that like right here aiming toward the 1 meter. Exactly. What are you getting? And release the button. It's blowing it out.
642.
642 guys, that's because we're right in the zone of peak candela, like where this is putting the most targeted photons. Now, just go ahead and put it down here and measure what we are down there. 12. So we're like a 30x, right? No, we're 50x. We're 50x. So that's how we achieve focus, right? Now, we don't really have enough light with one luminary to cover this whole thing, so let's just widen the beam a little bit and see how we do if we still have the contrast we need. So we've got 12.6 there. Now I've got a little bit broader coverage. If you want to go ahead and put this in the same spot here and tell us what you got.
705.
705, okay, so I think it's just a function of getting we're like, sometimes you line it right up with the peak candela spot and you just get a punchy zone, but we still have.
I think we were going above 1,000 originally.
Oh, okay.
Going back to dash, so I'm like, when it stopped, it just like, it's like, oh, it's 6.
Perfect. All right, so we end up getting a ton of punch from that. So let's take a look at what happens. I just want to demonstrate visually, even though this isn't on the slide. I want to find my color temperature shifter. I was more organized earlier today, you guys. All right, so we're going to shift the color temperature. I just want you to observe how the color on the flowers ends up changing. So is anybody familiar with the CTO shifter? Okay. That is a term from photography that uses a filter to effectively warm up or cool down the color temperature. More typically warming up, and they're just called CTO filters. A quarter filter warms things up by about 250 degrees Kelvin. Did you guys talk about degrees Kelvin today? Okay, so here's 3,000. All right, that's actually pretty good. It's showing the green well. It's showing the purple and the flowers well. If we decide to warm it up, this is going to shift it to about 2,400 K, which is one of our favorite hospitality color temperatures. Now, the green actually looks a lot warmer, shifting toward yellow. And do you see how the flowers, the purple, now looks a lot warmer than it did? So massive shift just from a half CTO change going from about 3,000 K to 2,400 K. We wouldn't usually use 2,400 K to light greenery plants or flowers. We actually potentially shift to 4,000 K. But in this instance, if you're in a hospitality environment, it's a nice option. So really fun to think about that, that focus. Now, I held this, I'm gonna do it just in profile so you can see a little bit better. I was holding this at about that 30-degree incident beam angle. From nadir, my ideal accent lighting is 30 degrees. That's an art or museum standard. That's a good thing to consider when you're thinking about accent light distance off of a wall. Come off of the center line of the art and go up 30 degrees. That's what this sketch is showing you here. And we always want to be cognizant of what kind of specularity we have. Specularity means how sparkly something is. Like if you've got a car that has a metallic finish or a high sheen or a high gloss, if you beam that thing with spotlights, you're going to get spotlights reflected. If you've got a polished stone countertop and you put task lighting, your under cabinet task lighting that doesn't have a diffuse lens on it, and you have diodes or pixelation, you're going to have a landing strip in that countertop. So those are things that we want to think about when we're doing accent lighting. Three-dimensional objects, one of the most important things here is to consider not just that 30-degree aiming angle and that face lighting like I was just doing, but backlighting is where the magic happens. So there is a slide in here that I hid due to time. And I know that we're getting tight on time, just looking, and we are at 8 o'clock. I've got just a couple more slides here. There is in stage lighting, we like to talk about key lighting, which is that primary brightest amount of light. We like to talk about fill light that balances, it's less bright, but minimizes the shadows. And then the magic happens when you do backlighting. So if you have someone on stage, if you ever attend a theatrical performance or you're seeing a movie that has really great lighting. If you look, or for instance, if you watch a talk show, you'll notice that there's always a little bit of light dusting the back of someone's head and their shoulders. And that's how we create something that's three-dimensional. Same thing when we're lighting three-dimensional objects. All right, so we did actually talk briefly about color temperature. I just want to call out that idea of the warmer the color temperature, the more intimate it feels. That ties right back to our biology. Firelight was our primary source of artificial illumination, or human controlled illumination. And we are, the more close to firelight, the quality of light or the color temperature, the more intimate it feels to us. So cooler color temperature definitely does create a little bit more focus. Warmer color temperature can promote creativity and collaboration. So some interesting psychological effects. So I've made a few more notes in the lower left corner there. Cooler color temperature can stimulate cognitive function, where warmer color temperature can stimulate creativity. So just think about that. Last but not least, you guys, we're just about finished here with what we're trying to do tonight. Intensity and beam spread, we looked at a lot of that, but what I want to do is just offer, does anybody want to come up and play with a couple of beam spreads? Can I have 2 volunteers? Don't be shy. Y'all have been sitting a long time. Come on, come on up, come on up. All right. And one more volunteer? Okay, all right, perfect. So I'm gonna have, let's see. Since you drove, do you want to drive? Do you want to shine the light, or do you want to receive the light? You're gonna receive the light. Okay, all right. It's gonna be interesting because he's got a dark shirt on, so you're gonna have to sell it. You're gonna have to sell it. Okay. So what you have right here is a negative 10-degree beam, and all you do is turn it on by this. It's a little fussy, so if it doesn't turn on, just push it in, and then what I want you to do is that 30-degree aiming angle that we're talking about. Come on over here. So you're gonna be close to him, yep, and I want you to hold at a 30-degree aiming angle, so you're gonna have to get a little closer and just shine the light on his shirt.
Does it feel like 30? I don't.
Nope, I think you can need to flatten it out a little bit.
Good jobs.
Yeah, why don't you trade jobs? Yeah, why don't you trade jobs? And you got on a little bit of lighter color, so come closer, and if you can turn, we just want everybody to be able to see this. So go ahead and shine that here on her chest. So we're gonna see a pretty tight beam spread. Yeah, it's a little fussy. Pretty tight beam spread. So you see how we've got fall off, we're darker here. We just have a lot of focus in here. Your top is doing a great job of that. That's a lot of very tight beams. So let's just go ahead and snap that right on top of there. And now do the exact same thing. All right, so we have a little bit more coverage now. You see how we're brighter down here. We've got more kind of splash over there. Now we've gone from a 10-degree beam to a 25. Let's go all the way to a 60-degree. If I can find one of those guys for us. 36, here we go. So, yep, I'll trade you. And then we'll do the same thing, and then we're gonna do something really fun. Okay, so do you guys see how there's just a lot more kind of splash light? So when we want to create that focus, we're using that narrower beam. If we want broader illumination, at this point, we're not really lighting something specific, we're just lighting. Now, this is just for fun. This is kind of the extra credit moment. This guy is what's called a linear spread lens. So this takes that 10-degree light and it stretches it out only on one axis. So this is going to give us a 10 by 60. What I want you to do is orient the 10 by 60 to go vertically. And you'll just have to, you can play with the twisting and the orientation. Ah, 90 degrees. Fascinating, right? It's helpful if you just show it, if you just go ahead and light up that piece of art, because you can light Well, do the one on the left. Do this one because it's rectilinear. You see that? Isn't that interesting? I can just rotate it slowly so everybody can see that beam spread. Do you guys see how that's changing? So what's really fun is that in our rule of LED, we can shape light quite well. And this is one of the ways that we can be very, very deliberate in spaces. Thank you both. That was fantastic. We can be very, very deliberate in spaces and we can really shape light in ways that is really clever. Like I lit hundreds of jewelry stores using a beam spread like this because I would just put this on the case, right? So if I'm up higher, basically I'm just putting that light right on that showcase. I have no spill light on the floor. So now, in terms of contrast, dark on the floor, bright on the case, we've saved energy, we've created focus, and we've created a lot of sparkle. So I think, guys, that is it for what we've got time to cover tonight. One more, let's do one more slide. And that's why this is kind of a fun demo right here. Last one, contrast, we've talked about quite a bit. Color rendering, did you guys, I think I heard Chris talking about CRI. Okay, and did you get the full lowdown on TM30 as opposed to the old crappy 8 or 9 pastel color system? Yeah, that's so like 1997, we're totally over it. We did talk a little bit about color temperature, but I want to go ahead and demo what's here in the center of the table. So I'm gonna ask everybody to get up and huddle around the center of the table. And my friend in black here, it looks like you're reasonably tall. I'm going to ask you to hold that down light. Everybody cluster around. I'm gonna ask you to hold that up just wherever you can and shine it right down onto all of those color squares. Thank you. And if you could go ahead and kind of spread the color squares apart a little bit for us, so we can see each of them individually. That's perfect. All right. And then I'm going to ask you to drive. If you want to turn it on, you've got intensity, go ahead and frizzle that up to the max output, great. And then go ahead and take the slider. What we're looking at is a tune white luminaire. So we're going from around 2000K up to about 6500K. If you want to go ahead and slowly slide it all the way to the right to the cooler color temperature, watch what's happening with the blues and the reds. If you can go really slowly, let's go all the way back down and watch carefully at how the colors are, how they show. We're shy of 3000K, we're in the incandescent land. And look at how the yellows and oranges and reds are popping as we get down. Are we all the way to the bottom? Okay, wow, so my eyes shift at this point, I'm like, oh, it's great. I love the warmer color temperatures at this time of night. But if we go ahead and we go back up kind of mid-range, the blues are gonna start looking much better now. Do you see how the blues and purples look a lot better? So we're probably at about a 3000K right here. I don't have a spectrometer with me, but there's such a huge shift in how different colors look under different color temperatures. So one of the, it's not just about function, it's not just about task, visibility, feel, the mood, the sense of spaciousness, whether you want clarity, you want to create focus. We also need to be thoughtful about the colors in the environment. If we have a lot of wood, which we don't have wood samples here, but woods are definitely going to lean more into this color range. So if we have a lot of wood and we say, oh, well, honestly, I think a 4000K would look so fabulous on all of that wood. Again, no good. We're gonna feel a lot better if we have something that's a little bit more like a 3000K on the wood. If we have a lot of sparkly, cool stone, and blue finishes or art that has a lot of that going on, are you gonna enjoy that? It starts to look really muddy. So we're going to want to shift into something that punches that a little bit more. And we can do that by having good CRI values throughout the spectrum. It doesn't just have to be strictly about color temperature, but this is a huge thing. And by the way, we're seeing a lot of color shift because the phosphors. Did Chris talk to you about the phosphors that coat blue pump LEDs? All right, the way that LEDs are typically made to be different color temperatures, they're made of blue. That's about 450 nanometers. They get yellow phosphors over them, and the composition of those phosphors and the amount and density of them, it's just mixing light. He did talk with you about additive light. So LEDs with phosphor coatings are additive light. We're just creating the white light by mixing the yellow and the blue in an additive fashion. Those phosphors, when in contact with the heat generating LED in a tight, small environment over time, degrade, and we see color shift. So stability of color temperature over time is also a really huge key consideration in the interior lighting world, or the lighting world period. So something else I want you to just kind of keep an eye out for and be thinking about if you're seeing any instances of color shift, like sometimes you'll go through large buildings like airports, and you can just buy a zone of downlights, and it's like, oh, that one's shifted, that one's pink shifted, that one's yellow shifted, that one's red shifted. Keep an eye out for it. I promise you will start to see it, and you're gonna start telling them, oh my God, I saw that. This phosphor wasn't created. This is color shifted over time. I can't believe this is happening. Anyway, so we're gonna leave it there. I am here. I'm gonna just be cleaning up. I want to thank you all for your attentiveness. We have a little bit more on the interior lighting module to button up next Thursday. But if you have any questions from today, feel free to stick around and ask me, or ping an email out to Brian, and we can pick those up when we finish up the unit. Again, thank you all for your attentiveness. I know this was the longest time into the warm room. You guys have been awesome. So thank you for the participation. Thank you. Right. Yeah, I know. I shall say all right.
At least it won't be any traffic. Knock on wood.
Better not do. You would take the USAI and back.
I would, yes.
That would be helpful, because then Peter doesn't have to come to get out.
Oh, Peter, you should just make him do it.
Oh, I always see. We can always hear him coming, it was like. He's following, and, yeah, there's Peter, okay.
I moved my.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I moved my desk over to the back corner. I don't know if you're familiar with our office, but the conference room is called the Duck Pond, which is the one that's painted blue. So I can be as far away from Peter's house as possible, because he's a boisterous person. Boisterous.
You know what, it's really cute.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Straight down, no.
Well, it's nice to meet you. This was a great group. I mean, super attentive, and just, I can tell from some of the looks that people are like, I don't know what she's talking about right now, and I don't know if it's meaningful.
I'm
to me,
excited
but-
to learn some of this. Is this with this or yours? Yeah, I'm excited to learn some of this. I've been CT just under a year, but I am the East tenure PM, you know, other ones that have been there 10 years.
Yeah,
So I was just excited to learn some of this stuff.
well, it's awesome that you're taking it. It's a really good crash course, and the instructors are great. Slaughter is like, he's just epic, and I'm like, I was, you know, I'm deep in the world of lighting design, so a little bit different to, you know, most of the more technical conversation here, but
Yeah, it's good to be, I like that it's well rounded.
yeah.
Are we working on any of your projects right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're always, you have some of your specs on projects, always. Yeah, we actually just wrapped up a nice one to cover the Beaver Creek covered bridge, and story. Cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay, well, the next one is virtual, so I'll
Yeah,
see you there.
that's all right. Well, thanks for introducing
Yeah,
yourself.
it was great to
Call Steve and Peter hello.
Okay, yeah, they just came back from education, so that was a nice break at the office.
We'll take the food.
Okay.
Alright.
Yeah, my house is already gonna be sleeping when I get home, and
Yeah.
just.
There's one across the hall. if you want.
Yeah, I can throw it in there, come on. I don't know that one. Alright.
How you go, Lisa?
Yeah,
Good. Thanks for rolling with the changes.
well, you know, I mean, it's kind of started with me to begin with, so. So, I mean, it's like,
Made
just,
it work.
it's all good, it is all good. At least I was able to get through all of the demos, was the important part.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just so helpful for people to see stuff firsthand, and it's a little hard to even, you know, it's like having a video of something is. It's a good fallback, but it's much better to have people able to look at it in the room.
Yeah.
And besides, then they have to change posture or get up or move around, or it shifts the energy. And I think that's equally important to seeing the people out. It's just, especially when it's 8 o'clock at night, so. Shift the energy.
Need help taking down anything or?
Let me see how I do. I think since I was able to send that USAI sample back with, goodness, what was her name again? The gal who was sitting here, she's a PM with
Oh.
Michelle with the sort of bobbed reddish hair.
I don't know yet.
It's either Michelle or Michaela.
Just
Start with Michaela. Start with an M. That's all I remember.